Isn't it funny that as we see this world, we expect everything to be perfect? It's just not.
Right.
And if you just slow down and say, hey, guys, let's problem solve this, let's roll, it's just not that difficult and not that hard.
I think that the people's biggest problem is they're too quick to freak out. There's a lot of, cynicism that the worst case scenario is the absolute truth. And if you just are more laid back and, assume that it's going to get fixed instead of assuming it's always going to be a problem, then that translates to every aspect of your life.
Yeah, how do we get there, right? Josh Sneed, thanks for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me.
Yeah, this is. I'm excited about the conversation today. So, as I thought about you, I never get to these questions, but I have some notes in case the conversation's just a disaster, and so I give us something to talk about. But I think about you. We've never met until today, and I thought, man, look at all this guy's roles in life. So you have a professional job, I think, right? Do you or no? A social media manager of sort for a company?
I handle the social media for Perfetti Van Mel, the local candy maker, Mentos and Airheads. If you ever interact with Mentos or Airheads on social media, you are talking to me.
All right, so you have that job. You're a dad.
I am a dad.
You're a husband.
I am a husband.
I'm assuming you're a friend.
I would hope so. That's not up to me, but I would like to think I am.
You have friends.
I do have friends.
You're a stand-up comedian for 20-something years.
That's correct.
Right? And also you're an entrepreneur.
I am.
Multiple T-shirt companies.
That's right.
But you also have a hat on today called this most recent iteration is probably, 18 years in the making? 2005?
2005 was the first shirt company.
2010 was Cincy Shirts.
2010 was Cincy Shirts, which has grown to be
pretty big.
Our biggest brand. Our hope is that it won't stay the biggest brand, but it is currently the biggest one.
So where does that come from? You hope it won't be your biggest brand.
Well, it's
you have a co-founder too, right?
Yes, Darren Overholzer is my partner. We started in. I don't know how far back you want to go. We can start
all the way to like
pre-birth,
baby.
Right.
Let's go.
Just a twinkle in my dad's eye. Cincy Shirts was started out of, I should say, our T-shirt company was started out of a desire for me to always want to love to do stand-up. So when I started doing stand-up, it was a month before my 21st birthday, and I was working at Procter Gamble in the IT department. And I immediately fell in love with stand-up. I had only started because I wanted to be on Saturday Night Live, and I wasn't sure how I could make that a reality. My only thought was maybe if I could just learn to make strangers laugh at an open mic night, that could be how I find out if there's something there, because I always was the funny guy. I played sports, but I wasn't never the best. I was like the funny guy. And my dad was the funny guy. He was a model maker at Kenner Toys downtown. He made Star Wars toys when I was a kid. I think that job kept him really young, and he surrounded himself with people that shared a similar sense of humor and a similar look at life of wanting to stay young. And I think that humor was sort of the through line for my whole childhood. It was something that I noticed very early with my dad, that he was always the one that would make people laugh and people went to for a laugh, and he sort of endeared himself to people because of having that quality. And then, my sense of humor was shaped by Saturday Night Live and, classic 80s comedies. Caddyshack and Ghostbusters, and that was Airplane. I always loved like puns and wordplay, and so as I got into out of high school and I was working in corporate America already, I still had this desire to like be on Saturday Night Live, and I really had no plans to do anything with it until I was at Willie's Sports Bar in Westchester, having dinner. I would go there every night after I got off work before I'd head home. My parents were living in Westchester at that time. And I kind of got to be friends with the staff because I'm not a drinker, but I was like in the bar by myself having dinner every night, not drinking. So I just kind of, got to be somewhat of a regular. And I met this guy named John Gamber who changed my life. And he was very funny. He was the manager there. And he would deliver food to people's tables in character, Jack Nicholson and Rodney Dangerfield. And he had these voices and just this presence about him. And he and I got to be sort of friendly. And he made a comment one night after something I said where he was like, "Man, you're pretty funny. You ever thought about doing anything with that?" And I was like, and I told him, I was like, "Well, I thought maybe I'd be on SNL one day, maybe try stand-up comedy or something." And he got like really serious. He goes, Are you joking?" And I was like, "No, I mean, I've thought about it, And he goes, "I'm going to tell you something that nobody here knows about me, and I'd like to keep it between us." And I said, "Okay." And he said, "I have a doctorate in theater." He said, "I studied in Los Angeles, and I moved here during the stand-up comedy boom of the 80s when Cincinnati had 3 comedy clubs. And I was actually teaching a class at, I think it was Cincinnati State, in stand-up comedy. He was teaching a class on how to write it, and then their final was to do an open mic night. And he's like, when the boom died down, I had to, figure out a way to support my family. And I got, I took a job working in the restaurant industry, and that's where I'm here. He's like, nobody here knows that about me. He goes, but, I still have that passion. And he was like, if I could just help you do an open mic night, he goes, I can't tell you how much that would mean to me to kind of dip my toe back into that water of something that I love doing. I just haven't done in forever. And so he said, "You're going to do an open mic night." And he made me sign up I tried to sign up in Cincinnati. I couldn't get anybody on the phone. So I ended up signing up in Dayton. It was like 3 months out. So in November, I signed up to do an open mic night in February, and he was like, "All right, time to get to work." And he gave me books he wanted me to read. He gave me a microphone so that I could hear how I sounded coming through a microphone. And then I would write material and bring it to him. And then he would say, "This is too easy. Everybody talks about this, focus on this." Like, he really helped me a lot before I ever even set a foot on stage. And so it came time to do the open mic night. And the guy from the club here in Cincinnati, Go Bananas, calls me and he says, "Hey, we have a cancellation for tomorrow. Do you want to do it?" Now, I'm supposed to be in Dayton the next week, and I have like 75 people coming to watch me do my first open mic night. So I told the guy at Go Bananas, I was like, yes. And then I didn't tell anybody else. But I was like, I can run through this set one time before all my friends and family see me.
How did he know? I want you to jump back on, but how did the Go Bananas guy know to call you?
I had left voicemails saying I would like to get booked for the open mic night, and none of the calls were ever returned. And then it just so happened that the week before I'm supposed to be in Dayton, I guess it got to my name on the list. So I went and did it, and like I said, it was a month before my 21st birthday, and probably by 7 or 8 years, I was the youngest person there. Now, today it's different. This was 98. So today it's different. I mean, there's like kids in high school doing stand-up comedy. But back then, like, I was super, super young. And so I get up there, and it doesn't go amazing, but it doesn't go horrible, probably like it goes for a lot of people on their first time, because I had kind of had like professional coaching on just some small things to avoid doing or saying when I was up there. But it was enough that the people there were like, "How long have you been doing this?" And I was like, "That was my first time." And they're like, "What? You didn't talk about how bright the lights were. You didn't stumble. You didn't, you know what I mean?" And so he helped me avoid a lot of pitfalls that I think a lot of people fall into when they first get going. And it was huge for me. But I fell in love with it instantly. And so now I'm working at P&G during the day, and I'm doing stand-up at night. And I'm a sponge. I'm at the club all the time, paying attention to the professionals, not just the material, but just like how they interact with the audience, how they deal with when the waitress brings the checks out and the momentum comes to a complete stop, how you deal with hecklers, like all that stuff. I wanted to learn as much as I could. But one thing that I noticed was the older guys had a resentment for comedy, right? It was all they knew. They'd been doing it for, 30 years. They had no relationships with their ex-wife or their children. They were living out of a suitcase because they'd given their life to comedy, and this is where it had taken them. So at a very impressionable part of my life, doing stand-up, I realized that I never wanted to become that. I never wanted to get to a point where I was doing stand-up because I had to, and that I resented it for all the things that it took away from me throughout my life, right? And so as I started to get out on the road more often, I found myself having days completely free where I would be just sitting in a hotel room, maybe going to play golf somewhere or something. But I had all this free time because I was literally just sitting around waiting for the show that night. And so I was dating a girl here in Cincinnati who's a lawyer. She had, obviously put in a lot of schooling and worked a lot of crazy hours, who could not let it go that I was just working nights, a couple nights a week, a few weeks a month, right? And so she basically quit seeing me because she couldn't stand how much free time that I had, And so out of spite, the T-shirt company was born. And it was born out of two reasons. It was born out of spite for her, but also I thought, you know what? I don't need this money right now. I don't need this thing to be successful right now. But if it can be successful 10, 15 years from now, when I'm married and have kids and I don't want to be on the road all the time, then this would afford me the opportunity to still enjoy stand-up, but not do it because I had to, right? And that's actually what's come to fruition.
So you honestly had that thought. How old were you at that point when she decides she's not going to date you anymore?
So that would have been, I could remember like it was yesterday. So this would have been like probably 2005. So I was 28.
Okay. All right. So wife's starting to get a little serious.
Serious enough that,
you're having these thoughts.
Yeah.
So you can remember being that 28-year-old Josh and thinking, if I can do this for a decade so that when I do have a family down the road, that this thing can pay off the way it needs to.
Right.
You honestly thought that then.
Yes. And I'll tell you why. So at the time it was like a side hustle. It was like, you know what? I'll do this. I'll start something during the day and I'll grow it and it'll keep me busy, and I'll show you that I don't have to do stand up. But that was the other thing that was kind of, and I still face that today too, is that people see like, oh, you get paid this much for working an hour, you know what I mean? Or you can take off a week at a time just because you want to. And it's like, I can because I paid my dues back then. Like that. They wouldn't be asking that question when I was like sleeping in my car at a rest area or having grilled cheese or ramen 5 nights a week. You know what I mean? Where I'd leave my apartment here in Cincinnati and I might not be back for 2.5 months because I've routed my gigs to drive me all the way out to Denver and back,
An overnight success, right?
Right. They're like, oh, it must be nice to work for 45 minutes a day. That and they say it in jest, and I think the people closest to me know that I pay my dues. But that was in 2005, and that's sort of the genesis of the way the T-shirt company started. I found this guy who had dabbled in stand-up. He knew who I was. He introduced himself. He was a super talented artist. He had moved here from Northeast Ohio to go to the Art Academy and stayed. And he was doing these paintings that absolutely blew my mind. They were hilarious. He would take styles of like famous artists and then just do something super edgy or completely off the wall with that style. Robert Kincaid is the artist that does like the real amazing floral like
They had
forest.
shops in the mall all the time. Yeah.
So he would do one, and it would be the exact same style, but the house is like on fire in the middle of the woods with all these animals like leaving the woods.
And that spoke to you?
And it was he called it the death of Kincaid, like that. And like that made me like, of course, at that point in my life too, it made me laugh so hard, you know. And so I found out he liked golf. We would play golf, and his hustle at the time was he had created a Monopoly game for deer hunters. So there's a company in Cincinnati called Late for the Sky. They do board games, and they had signed a deal with Parker Brothers back in the 70s, who owned Monopoly, and they were a partner. They were a partner with Kenner to be able to do these Opoly games that everybody's seen in the airport and gift shops. It's like Dogopoly and Chocolate-opoly and all this stuff. And so he had struck a deal with them where he created Whitetail-opoly, and he had done all the artwork and made all the pieces, and he was selling it in Bass Pro Shops and Cabela's, and that was sort of his side gig. And at that time, I was opening for the Blue Collar Comedy Tour. I was touring, opening for Ron White and Larry the Cable Guy and Bill Engvall. And I was seeing these crowds show up to purchase anything with their name and picture on it. And so I was like, we should do Blue Collar Opoly. We should work on this Blue Collar Opoly, because there's so many jokes between the four of them. I was like, this could be in Walmart. You know, I told my manager about it, and he was like, I think it's a great idea. So we built a whole prototype out of this board game and had the best time working together doing it. And by the time that we were done with it, those guys had become so popular that they were selling out arenas by themselves. They didn't need to brand themselves as a foursome anymore. So the idea was kind of dead in the water. But we had so much fun working together that we were like, what else can we do? And at the time, funny T-shirts were all the rage, like Snorg tees and busted tees and, you know, putting movie quotes on shirts. And so the idea was that we would both come up with concepts. He would do the design, and then I would go out on the road and tell people about the shirts, right? I'd wear them to the radio station, and I'd talk about it on stage, and then that's how we were going to grow our brand. So that's how we got started. And then in 2008, my dad passed away, who was like my best friend, and it sort of gave me a perspective that, you know, like tomorrow's never promised kind of thing. And so I put more effort into the T-shirt company probably than I had originally planned on, because of what we just talked about. That was the event in my life that I think gave me the kind of foresight of like, where do I want to be in 10 years? And if this is where I end up being, I can't sustain relationships with a spouse or children if I'm constantly on the road. You know, I don't want to miss first steps and first games and preschool graduations. Plus, they're great sources of material for stand-up. So,
yeah, right.
So yes, I did have that foresight, but I think the passing of my father is kind of what gave me that.
How long did it take you in that moment? I think you're probably at a place now. What are we, 15 years later, right? That you can probably just appreciate him for the awesome guy he was.
For sure.
Right? It was probably tough getting to that. But as you spoke about it, you're not crying anymore. It's impacted you in a good way.
Yeah, I might start. I mean, it's tough.
Yeah, I can tell he impacted. I mean, you're a comedian because of him.
Yeah, and
right? Am I wrong about that?
No, I mean, for sure. That's where the sense of humor came from. But it just the timing of it was really hard, because I had auditioned for Last Comic Standing. And it was horrible. It was like, it could not have gone worse. I interrupted their lunch. It was not my fault. I was supposed to audition in the afternoon in New York City, and they were running ahead of schedule, but I was there early. And so the person that they thought was their last person before lunch break, the producer's like, actually, we got one more. And they're like, oh. Like, I could just see it on their face. Like, now I'm the guy keeping them from going to lunch. And I didn't know any of them. And so I didn't even get a joke out before they just stopped me, and they were like, thanks. And I was like, I didn't even say a punchline yet, you know? But I could tell that it was not going to go anywhere, and arguing would not have been the smart play. So it soured me to the point where I was like, I'm not going to audition for this show anymore, because I don't like the way I feel. And so the following year, my dad's very sick. He's got limited time. And the comedy club owner in Atlanta says, hey, we're doing a show down here, and I can't tell you what it's for, but if you can make it, and I'm kind of already giving away what happened. So I said, listen, my dad's very sick, and I just don't think, and they go, totally understand, do your thing. If something works out that you can be here, it would be worth your time to be here. And I was like, okay, so they had given him about a month, and my parents are like, listen, like, there's nothing you can do here. Go do this show. Come right back. It's fine. It's one day. So a friend of mine that worked for Delta gave me a buddy pass. I was able to get a last-minute flight. And the club had said, if you show up in our parking lot before the show starts, we will put you on the show, which I really appreciated, that I didn't have to, commit too far out. So I go down. I do this show. I have a great set. And at the end of the show, the comedy club owner comes up, and there's probably 20 of us on the stage. And he says, you're probably wondering why you're here. And he says, well, for years now, Last Comic Standing has done their auditions where it's you in front of 3 judges trying to convince them to let you be on the show. He's like, this year they wanted to do something a little different where they could see you in your element with an audience. So you guys don't know it, but you just auditioned for Last Comic Standing, and we're taking 2 of you to New York City this Friday to perform on the show. You don't have to wait in line. You're going to be in front of an audience this Friday night in New York City. And they picked me and another guy. And I was like, listen, guys, like, I really appreciate this. I was like, my dad literally has days to live, and I don't know that I can do this. And they're like, well, talk to your family, let us know. And of course, my family again was like, go and come back. So this is the last flight on Thursday night. They booked me on to New York. The show is taping on Friday, and I'm coming back on Saturday. My dad is in hospice at this point. So I say goodbye. I get on the flight, and my wake-up call Friday morning in New York is that he passed away. And I'm supposed to be funny that night, right? So
it's life, isn't it? From an entrepreneur perspective, and I want you to jump on back to that in a second, but I've been on this thing recently with a company. I'm like, hey, so we have 100 and something agents now at this company, and we're adding 8 to 10 new agents a month. I have this leadership team, and every day, the more people we add, we're dealing with people that have lives happening. And man, if one of the toughest things that we haven't found in life to deal with as you're trying to do a new thing is just trauma, man.
Yeah.
Like, it's the things that happen to us daily that none of us want, but it's like, man, that's life.
Yeah.
And I think finding a way to operate and succeed in spite of all the other bullshit happening to us.
I agree with that.
Right?
And you always want to be at a point in your life where you feel like I think if I was still at P&G, and this is not a dig on P&G, but I think if I was still at P&G, I risk getting to a point where you stop feeling, right? You get into a routine of the same thing every day, and then you have this end goal that you see years down the road that you're working for, and in these times, who knows if it'll even be up to you if you reach that point, right? Whether it's from a company standpoint or, cutbacks or whatever that is, you run the risk of a mundane life of same thing day in and day out. And I think that when I think of entrepreneur, and I thought about like even what I was going to wear today, and luckily my buddy Mo Egger had been here in a hat. I was like, you know what? It's almost appropriate to come dressed the way that I would dress because I don't have to. Like, I chose a life that I don't have to be told what I have to wear every day. Man. That's one of the joys of being an entrepreneur.
Yeah,
is that you decide what your day looks like.
I'm starting to so multiple times a day I get caught up in just these random conversations, and it's about what's happening in your life, my life, employees' lives, and as you're sitting there talking about the mundane, and again, it's not to hate on corporate America. I was there. I spent 5 or 6 years there, and for some people, I guess it's better for them. I can't connect with that, but I guess it is.
Yeah.
However, the life that I want, like selfishly as I share it, the life I want is I want the surprises and the unique good experiences that I didn't know was coming down the pike. But I know with that, there's going to be a lot of mental challenges.
Mm-hmm.
There's going to be a lot of adversity to overcome. I'm going to face things I haven't faced. So the life I want to build is like, let me build the mark.
Yeah.
So that when all that stuff comes, because that's what I want,
Right.
I'm prepared for it. And I'm not prepared for exactly how I'm going to act, but I build such an individual, such a person, but it's like, let's go.
Yeah.
Right? And that's hard, but just that to develop maybe the will, to develop, I guess, maybe the perseverance, the persistence that, like, no matter what comes, I'm going to get through it, because it's in the midst of it when you start to conquer that moment. I'm sure you've had moments on stage.
Oh, for sure.
Right? You're like, all right, man. I remember how it felt. I was scared as hell. I was nervous. I was intimidated. And all I had to do was get up here and do it.
That's right.
Right?
And for different reasons,
Yeah.
too. You know, it could be like, you know, to go back to my dad.
Yep.
I had jokes about him in my act, and I was like dreading after he passed, how was I going to react on stage in the moment when I have to do this material about him, you know? Like, am I going to break down, you know? And I didn't, and I think that part of that is sort of the kind of like euphoria that I think gets created in a comedy club that is like almost like an escapism kind of thing. Like, it's why I don't talk about politics and stuff, because I think people are there to just forget about everything else and kind of be submersed in this, like, this is, you know, even if I do the same material every night, this show is its own thing and we're all experiencing it together. And it could go off on these couple tangents based off of things that happen in the room. But in this moment, this is a unique thing that we're all part of together. And, you know, like doing stand-up, I would get people that would come up to me after the show and they would say, you know, like, I needed this, right? Like, I had a bad day at work, all the way from I had a bad day at work to I got fired, or I'm divorced, or somebody passed away and I haven't laughed, and you know what I mean?
Yeah.
And it's like,
it made my day okay.
Yeah. And like, I don't know, I'm sure there's other jobs, but it's tough. You could probably count on one hand the jobs that people would say that to you. And
so can we go back to that Friday?
Yeah, we can. But I'll just wrap that up by saying there have been moments since where, like, I benefited from that
environment.
Yeah. And that Friday was one of them.
So it's like, with how do you, the toughest thing you've ever dealt with thus far in your life?
Yeah.
You're 30 years old.
Right.
Right?
Yeah.
How do you get through that, man?
So I was mentally preparing myself all day for it. And you know, it's like, it's just 4 minutes, like, you know, like I'm surrounded by, like, this is an awesome experience. And I'll never forget this. God love my aunt. You know, I'm literally minutes. Like, it's funny. It's sad, but it's also funny. I'm minutes from going on stage, and I'm on the phone with my family, who are all together back home, and they're all saying good luck. And my aunt, this is what my aunt says. She goes, he probably went ahead and passed away so that he could be there tonight. And I'm like, I'm about to go on national television. You cannot say that to me, you know. But I also kind of laugh because, like, that's totally something that an aunt would say, right?
Trying to help you,
yeah.
And it's like, damn it.
But it was like, really, and so I ended up having like a really good set. I didn't make it on to the next round, but in the circumstances that I was given, I did as good of a job as I could have done. You know what I mean? And so it just kind of gave me the confidence that you're talking about, of just like, you never know what. I can't imagine something worse than this happening, and I was still able to perform.
And if it does,
yeah,
I have this thing to work with now.
Right? I can pull from this.
I got through it. And that's, I think, there's a lot of people who, you know, we write books, or there's Instagram reels, but there's an idea, a popular idea that really hits with me. It's like, hey, how do you know that you can get through this tough thing you're going through in your life right now? What it is? It could be a divorce, somebody really important, you passed away. How do you know you can get through that? If somebody's so confident, be like, Mark, you can do it. Or Josh, you can do it. And a response is, well, like, hey, think about the toughest 5 things in your life that you've dealt with.
Yeah.
You know where it's going.
Mm-hmm.
And then it's like you made it through it, right?
Yep.
It's like, damn it. All right, well, you can do this too. And I think those experiences that we all personally have, it's like, let me go back to the most difficult thing. And we can compare, like, how's this compare to that?
Right.
So if it's easier, you're like, I got this.
Right.
Or if it's tougher, it's like, wow, okay, I'm going to need to call upon the resources I developed then and then have to get a little bit better here.
And that is something that I didn't see coming out of what I went through with my dad, is that I was so vocal about it and how hard it was, and honestly how hard it still is. But I became the resource for friends of mine that had to go through it afterwards.
I'm going to go out on a limb here.
Yeah.
This is going to be a crazy place, man. But I'm a guy who talks about our mortality all the time. At some point, unless you know the secret to living life forever that I don't know, at some point, you and I physically are not going to be here.
Right.
Okay. Do you have, is it kid or kids?
2 kids.
Don't you want them to feel this same way that you feel? I would.
Yeah.
I would, man. And so I'm like, that's special because the way your dad impacted you. I read something yesterday too. I think it's Jim Rohn. He's one of these big time self-help gurus, like the best of all time. And what he said was, he's like, hey, it's about living an impactful, meaningful life. He's like, isn't it better to live an impactful, meaningful, productive life for 30 years than living for 100 years where none of that happened?
Yes.
That makes sense to us. Being
Yes.
here healthy, it makes sense. And so whatever your dad did for you, the people who leave their kids feeling this way,
Yeah.
dude, they checked the box.
That's the goal.
That's it. Did you see what Keanu Reeves said on Colbert years ago? So Colbert asked him a question. And, you know, those late night guys, you know, it's your business.
Mm-hmm.
I'm sure there's some gotcha questions beforehand. What do we ask this person? And he said, hey, Keanu, what's going to happen when you die? And he sat back like he does. He seems like he sits back and said, well, I know the people that love me that are still here are going to miss me.
It's great. It's perfect.
Isn't that it?
Yeah.
That's it. And so I think if we live a life, whatever it is, whoever we impact, if we can live a life so people feel like you felt.
Right.
That's it. That's
Right.
it.
Right.
And then so what that does to prepare you to be a friend, to be a dad, to be a significant other, because I bet at that moment, when did you start dating your wife?
So my dad passed in February of 2008. I met her in July.
See, I was going to say something like that. That's where that question came from. I bet
It's a funny story. But
I bet what you went through, it was defining for the rest of your life from then until now. That didn't just change you. It probably brought a sense of like maturity, a sense of purpose, a sense of what am I going to do with my life? I'm assuming.
Yeah. And he was he had a day job, right? Like he had a job that was as fun as it was. He was a model maker. He was a machinist. You know, he did the same thing every day, and even when it was on toys, it's still that thing that we're kind of talking about, right? It's a leave work at work, I clock in, I have set vacation days, that whole thing. So he was never really one to, give like sage, pearls of wisdom. I never got to a point in my life probably where I would have been looking for that kind of stuff before he passed away. But the times that he did it were very impactful for me. And so his passion was cars. He loved old cars. He would take a car from the junkyard off the scrap heap, completely rebuild it by hand in our garage, get it into a car show. It would win an award. He would sell it and start over. That was his thing. He loved cars. And so I never got into cars, so I never got that bug for like learning how they work and stuff. But I did pick up on like the presentation and the showmanship of, and something he said to me that always stuck with me was, if my name is going to be on it, I want it to be quality, right? So And so that was whether he was fixing something for someone else or if he was submitting something to a car show. If it had his name on it, he wanted to be proud of it.
That's something that, man, as a mentor, as a parent, as a friend, see, I think we get caught up on needing somebody to be great every day. Like, I know how that thing that he taught you applies to you being a comedian, applies to you being a husband, applies to you being a father, applies to you being an entrepreneur, applies to you being a social media manager. I know that principle. It's like, if that's all he taught you, like, he was obviously special.
Right.
That's all you needed.
It is because it's a trickle down thing, right?
Yeah.
If you make an effort to be great and put 100% into whatever it is you're working on, everything else works itself out. And that by setting an example, I think, like, especially when it comes to kids, is that more so what they see you do and how they see you interact, I think leaves more of an impact than what you tell them they should do.
So why do you think that?
Because that's
as a kid,
yeah,
that's what happened, right?
Yeah, that's what happened to me.
We make life way too complicated. Like, that's simple. It is so simple every day, the approach that you take. And I'm like, why? You're like, well, that's what I saw.
Yeah.
No more complicated.
Right.
That's it. So then 2008, what happens on this iteration from 2008? A lot of things change. You said about meeting your wife.
Yeah. I mean,
what happened? You're like, that was a story.
Well, so just the story of how I met my wife was funny because I had done Go Bananas. It was the first gig I did after he passed away. It was literally like 2 weeks after he passed away. I had a week booked at Go Bananas, and they offered me the chance to move it. And I said I was going to do it because I don't do a lot of local shows here because I want it to feel like it means something when I perform around here. So, I had spent so many years going up every week, but I just know so many people here, so to get them to come out to a club, I don't want to have to try to convince them 4 times a year. I want to be like, this is the day, let's do it. And so a lot of people were coming, and I thought it would be, good for me, but I don't know if cathartic's the right word, but I was like, I'm going to do the week. So I have this great week at Go Bananas. Everything sells out. Everybody's super supportive and comes out because they know what I'd just gone through. And then February, at the time on Comedy Central, was stand-up month. And so they take the all the people who had half-hour specials on Comedy Central. This was at the time, and they did what was called the Stand-Up Showdown, where online all of February people could vote on what their favorite half-hour special was, and then they would count down the top 10 at the end of the month on a day. So they were really pumping up this day, and I found myself in second place. I was in second place to Jeff Dunham, the ventriloquist, who was selling out arenas. So, I mean, he was the top comedian that year by a mile. And so coming in second to him felt like coming in first. And so they were counting down the top 10 specials. And then, I got a lot of views that night. And the president of Comedy Central Records reached out to my manager and said, hey, would Josh be interested in recording an album for Comedy Central? And so I said, obviously, of course. And they said, well, where do you want to record it? And the only place that I knew I wanted to record it was Go Bananas, but I had just been there. I mean, I was literally there like 3 weeks ago. And so the club said, well, why don't we do it in like April? It'll give us a couple weeks to promote it. We'll just do Friday, Saturday. And we'll tell people if you just came in February, it's going to be some of the same material, but it's an album recording for Comedy Central. So come out and laugh. So
is that what they consider a special now? See, you actually, it seems like without me.
Not now. It used to be.
But didn't that just happen with somebody in California? Didn't a dude just bring his special back to just one of the top guys? You know him. I just remember from listening to Rogan and stuff.
Okay.
One of the guys he's connected with had 2 nights in. What's the big one in Hollywood? You've been there.
Like the Improv or something?
One of those two, right?
Yeah,
and so
Factory.
It seems like he did his entire special those 2 nights, and I went, oh, that's how it used to be done, kind of.
Yeah.
I think it just happened with somebody.
Well, now it's all about streaming and Netflix, and
Okay.
like the goal is to get an hour special that is put out on Amazon or somewhere. But back then those were reserved for HBO, and those are going to be like the biggest names in comedy get an hour. If back then a special was defined as a Comedy Central presents, a half-hour special on Comedy Central was what everybody
and
wanted.
that's what's happening.
And that
So we go.
So
to
I
these
had
2
already
days.
gotten that. I had gotten that. Now it's an album. Now it's a recording that will be for sale
CDs.
on iTunes and CDs. That's right. Get it in Best Buy if you're lucky. Circuit City.
How about
we're
those
really
friends?
dating ourselves now?
How about the friends asking for the discounts?
Yeah, always. It's always the people that should want you to succeed the most. They're the first ones that ask for a discount.
Shouldn't you be like, dude, pay the $14.99?
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah.
So
No,
those 2
you're absolutely
nights.
right. So I record these. This is really going to date what 2008 looked like.
Hey, you're older than me, for the record.
Yeah. After I record those shows, I get a friend request on MySpace from
Yeah,
a hot brunette.
You just dated yourself.
Yeah. Who is in a relationship. And so I just say why I sent her a note on MySpace because like I'm looking at her. On MySpace, you could see everything about everybody, their favorite movies and books, and
It was about music and stuff a lot.
yeah, it was
MySpace.
like a dating profile before dating profiles were a thing, where you're like, here's a gallery of lifestyle shots.
Do you like me?
Yeah, and so I sent her a note and I said, why is it whenever a beautiful brunette adds me as a friend on MySpace, she's in a relationship? And she fires back, why is it if I meet a charming comedian, I'm going through a bad breakup? And I'm like, okay. So the door's open.
Here we go.
So 2 months later, I met my now wife in person after she had ended her relationship. But the only reason she was at the show that night was because her boyfriend was a big fan, and it was his birthday, and he wanted to see my album recording. So he drug her to the comedy club that night, and that's how she was introduced to me. And then now we're married with 2 children.
Did you have a good joke that came from that?
Not from that. I
You
mean, obviously
should.
from a lot of stuff since then.
Okay. I mean, is that where good jokes come from just life?
Yeah, of course.
Yeah,
The
that's-
album cover for my second album is a picture taken a day after my son was born. And the story behind it is my wife had a C-section. She's been in bed for like almost 48 straight hours. And she just wanted to sit in a regular chair. She's like, I just want to sit in a normal chair for a minute. So there's 2 chairs in the room. I'm in one. Her mother is in the other. So I get up. I take the baby. She sits down in the regular chair. Now I'm sitting in the hospital bed with the baby. And I make the joke, how funny would it be if the nurse comes in and I'm the one in the bed holding the baby like I did all the work, making my wife who just had a C-section sit in a regular chair. And so I go, we got to take a picture. And Jenny's like, Josh, no. And I was like, come on, it'd be really funny. So her mom took the picture. I took my shirt off so that I'm just wearing a white T-shirt. I'm holding the baby in the hospital bed, and she is in her gown, no makeup, holding a cup of water up to my mouth so that I can take a drink. And so that ended up being the photo for my second album, and it was called Unsung Hero.
What did she expect when she was marrying a comedian?
Well, I think that's the thing, is like she knew what she was getting into, which, kind of gives me like the card of like, you knew what you were getting into. And so she's been the source of a lot of my most popular jokes.
Are you ever worried about that?
No. I usually run stuff by her first. Like, is this funny? And she's kind enough to give me an honest answer even when she is the butt of the joke.
Did you send that ex-boyfriend like a thank you card on your wedding day or something?
No, but where it gets funnier is she was working at the University of Dayton at the time, commuting back and forth from where I had a townhouse in Loveland. And we were wanting to move into a house. We were looking in the Westchester area, and she'd be on the road. She was in athletics, so she was on the road more than I was during basketball season. And so she'd go look at houses while I was on the road, and vice versa. And I was like, I found our house. Like it's exactly where we want it, the right price range, the right size. It's in a cul-de-sac. It's in Westchester. And she's like, this is great. So then she goes to look at it the next week while I'm on the road. And she goes, the only problem is that this is in the same neighborhood as her ex-boyfriend's parents, who she has found out through various sources is now moved back in with them. So now this guy thinks that like I've stolen his girlfriend and married her, and now I've moved into his neighborhood to like really, really rub it in.
Kind of sounds inappropriate.
I mean, you got to shoot your shot, right? Mine went in.
Didn't you let her know though, like, hey, because it sounds like she was in sports, but was she coaching or something like that, or no?
She was a SID for University of Dayton, so she was in the athletics.
So you should have let her know, like, hey, the last time I was in a relationship with somebody professional, it didn't go well.
Well, it's funny you say that, because the hang up on almost every relationship that I had was my schedule. You know, it would start out, I was like, oh, you do comedy, like that's fun. But then 2 or 3 months later, it's like, oh, you're gone a lot.
She was cool with it. She was just the person.
Because she got it.
Yep.
You know, during basketball season, like I said, she was gone more than I was. So that was never a hang up for her. She was independent because she was able to take care of herself when I was gone, and then she understood what I was going through living out of a suitcase on the road. And I told her, I was like, I don't want it to always be like this, but right now it has to be like this because I'm trying to grow my career, but I want to get it to a point where this doesn't have to be the norm.
And she was like, cool, let's go.
Yep.
That's special.
It is.
Yeah.
I mean, it's why I put a ring on it.
That's why she allowed you.
Yeah.
To put a ring on it.
So
2010.
Yep.
So this is like 2008, 9, 10. So the next iteration of the T-shirt business.
Mm-hmm.
How's that happen?
So we had started to grow our brand, Look at Me Shirts, out of a little shop in Dayton, Kentucky.
God, that's awful arrogant.
Yeah. Well, that's what the whole thing was at the time. People were wearing T-shirts that seemed to say, "Hey, look at me."
That's what.
Look at my movie quote.
That's what all of us do.
Yeah.
Cars, things we wear, sunglasses.
Yeah. And the first time we ever got press for Look at Me Shirts here locally,
out of
Dayton, Kentucky, was a shirt that said, "Even God hates the Steelers." Just white, basic font on a black T-shirt. We went viral for whatever that meant in the moment of 2007, 8. But it got enough people to know that we had a tiny little store. And so we would start to get more and more foot traffic because prior to that it was all online. And as we started to get more foot traffic, we thought, oh, well, this would be fun to start to create some stuff specifically aimed at locals because that's who's coming in the store. So we know we're not going to sell a ton of these online, but, I'm just picturing them all in my head. We had A1A Beachmont Avenue, instead of Beachfront Avenue from Ice Ice Baby. We had, just
local.
Yeah, Spring Break Norwood, with like a guy surfing, just like Oakley is not Hyde Park, because that was always the stuff in Oakley was like it's Hyde Park near, so we'd make fun of that.
So what about because I hear those things, I'm like, yeah, that's super local, and if you weren't here, you wouldn't know it,
right?
And then people feel it's special because it like speaks to them. It's like, yeah, man,
yeah.
Yeah.
And then so we always had a little section on Look at Me Shirts that was Cincinnati themed, right? Whether it was funny or what I loved growing up here was all the old local business logos, right? The Swallens and the Steinbergs and Surf Cincinnati and Caddies and Sleep Out Louie's and like, not the Vortex, but like the King Cobra, like all the rides from Kings Island that were long gone. But Cincinnati specifically, and I would say a lot of Midwest, Milwaukee, Pittsburgh, Cleveland.
KC maybe.
Yeah. They're places that they're not transient populations, right? They're people that grew up there and stayed there, and they're several generations deep. And so what we noticed about Look at Me Shirts is that when people would go to that site, they'd see all these movie quotes and pop culture references, and they'd be like, these are hilarious. I really like that one, right? But when we would show what ended up being Cincy Shirts to people from Cincinnati, they're like, I want every single one of these, right? And so that clicked with me. And so the problem was we were screen printing. So if a logo had 6 or 8 colors in it, like you just can't screen print that unless you're making 144 of them. And now you got to hope you're going to sell 144 T-shirts, which was not happening at that time. So then we end up getting through a couple different connections. We ended up partnering with a company out of Mason called Touchstone, who has made their name in the promotional products industry. And they had a digital printer. So it was basically the same way that a printer in your house or your office works. It just,
a one-off.
You load the T-shirt and it would print full color right onto the shirt. So while we were continuing to grow Look at Me shirts, I thought this is a great time to start an all Cincinnati website, because we could do a bunch of really cool old Cincinnati themed shirts with these logos that the trademark had expired on, so we don't have to ask anybody's permission to use it. So we had been setting up as Look at Me shirts at local events. We didn't have a storefront. We would just set up at local events, Brouhaha and Bunbury, the Italian festival, like just whatever we could to get a booth out there, and we'd put our local stuff out. And what we would hear is, where's your guys' store? Where's your guys' store? And then when we launched Cincy Shirts and we would show up to places as Cincy Shirts in 2010, we really started to hear it. Where's your store? We'd get emails like the first 2 weeks of December. Where's your store? I got to come get a Christmas gift. And we're like, sorry, the cutoff was December 6th. Sorry. And we heard that enough that we were finally like, why don't we have a store? Mm-hmm. And our business partner and mentor at Touchstone was like, I want no part of brick and mortar retail. It is a dying industry. This is not what I signed up for. Let this thing grow, make money while you sleep, that kind of thing. But Darren and I were younger, obviously. We were hungry. We wanted to take more risks. We wanted to kick this thing to the next level and not have this like really slow growth. And we thought, so we bought him out is basically what happened. We found a spot on Main Street.
Downtown Cincy.
Yep. That it had a boutique in it. The lady had moved out, so nothing really needed to be done to the space. And they were gonna give us a 3-month lease, November, December, January 2014. And we thought, let's do it. We bought some fixtures on Craigslist of some stores that were going out of business.
Put up some slat board, the little hook to the walls.
That's exactly what we did.
Yep.
We said, these are probably our 15 most popular designs. Let's print a run of them, and let's just see what the holiday season looks like. We'll make it enough in the Christmas rush to pay for this.
The big 6.
So we had fun doing it. People loved that we were there. We decided in January, they were like, you guys want to stay on for another year? And we're like, let's see what a full year here looks like. Because 2015, the All-Star game was going to be here, so downtown was going to kind of be buzzing. Vine Street had already been resurged, but the Main Street was kind of tapped as like the next street to kind of come back. And so we were like, let's just see what happens. And the All-Star game was fine. It did some business for us, but in September of 2015, they announced plans for a soccer team to come to Cincinnati. Now, I grew up in St. Bernard, small high school. We didn't even have a football team. Everybody played soccer instead. So I'd followed soccer. I'd played pretty much my whole life.
Is that Princeton? What school did you go to?
St. Bernard High School.
Okay, it was St. Bernard.
Right down the street from Roger Bacon.
Okay, there you go. Yep.
Roger Bacon was the private high school in St. Bernard. I was public.
Yep. So small school.
Small school. 72 in my graduating class.
Okay. So FC Cincy's coming to town.
Yeah. And, so I had followed soccer, and I had followed the city's attempts to have some sort of a professional minor league team here. It was always like, oh, we're going to play in this league you've never heard of at 10 a.m. on a high school field on Saturday mornings. This felt different, right? Our games are at UC. Our kits are sponsored by Toyota. Carl Lindner is backing this. It's one level below MLS. And I was like, this might be the real deal for minor league soccer.
You felt that.
I felt that.
Yep.
To the point where I told Darren, I said, we need to do merch for this team. If it takes off, we need to do merch for this team. But we couldn't get anybody on the phone. So we bought 4 season tickets in October before they'd ever played a game, and then reached out and said, hey, we're season ticket holders. Could we talk to someone in merchandising? So we got a meeting with this guy, Ryan Johnson, who was our ticket rep, and then Dan McNally, who's still with the team. He runs the entire facility at TQL. He's amazing. But we're like, hey, would you meet us at Eli's Barbecue at Finley Market so we can pitch an idea to you? And they're like, okay. So we're like, we want to make T-shirts. And they're like, well, we don't really need T-shirts. We've got a place that makes them for us, and we have jerseys and scarves. And we're like, no, we want to make T-shirts for fans, for people to wear to the games. They're like, we haven't even played a game yet. And I go, I know. But we want to do something different than what you guys are doing. You guys are selling jerseys and scarves. We know that you have someone who makes T-shirts when you need them internally. We want to sell fan gear. And they're like, okay, I guess. Why not? And so we're like, okay, do we got to go through the league to get a license? They're like, no, this is minor league soccer. Like, you go through us. I'm like, okay, cool. Well, we'll just come up with designs. You approve them, and then we'll sell them. And they're like, okay. So the second game, they break the league attendance record. They are not set up to handle the amount of people coming to the games. They have no merch left in like week 3 for the stadium. Their tiny little team shop that was on 4th Street
Downtown,
underneath their offices was cleared out.
Tapped.
So they're on their social media saying, if you need a T-shirt, if you want something to wear to the game, go to Cincy Shirts. We're sold out. So for the first time ever, we have lines down the block on Main Street because we are the only person selling fan gear to a team drawing 20,000 people every match. And they're literally people who've never been to a match before. This stuff doesn't exist. So it's not like, oh, I'll just go grab my old red shirt for the one time I go.
New colors, everything.
They don't have it.
Yep.
It doesn't exist. So hand over fist, we are
printing shirts
money. And selling them, especially on match days, out of Main Street. And we're just like, and at this time, we're still outsourcing our online shipping and fulfillment to Touchstone. Excuse me. And so we're like, we got to capitalize on this. So we decide we're going to open a new location in Hyde Park. And we found this spot that had two areas to it. And we thought we'll do a store on this side, and on this side we'll print and ship, and we'll bring that in-house, and we'll make more money off of that. So we do that. It is as cramped as we could be in there. I mean, it's like insane how much stuff we fit into that side where we're printing and shipping for online orders. So now we're at Hyde Park. Things are going great. We've got Hyde Park and OTR, and now Fiona's born.
Tell us who Fiona is.
Fiona, if you don't know, is a hippopotamus at the Cincinnati Zoo, arguably one of the most famous animals in the world now. But when she was born 6 weeks premature. And at that point, no hippopotamus born in captivity that early had ever lived. But the Cincinnati Zoo, who we had already been partners with, doing some old vintage zoo shirts, did an amazing job of putting her story out on social media. They had around-the-clock coverage and updates. They were bringing in NICU nurses from Children's Hospital who were very good at getting needles and IVs into tiny veins, who were able to literally save this hippopotamus, and the world that followed along fell in love with her. And it was an amazing story, and we had been asking, can we do a shirt? Can we do a shirt? Because she needed 24-hour care. And they had talked about Team Fiona and raising money for her. And so they're like, well, we got to make sure she's going to live before, we can start selling merch. And so when they felt pretty confident that she was going to live, they did their own like GoFundMe T-shirt that raised a bunch of money. And then after that, they said, if you guys still want to do a shirt, you can. So we, one of our artists at the time, Rob, did an amazing job drawing this cute little adorable Fiona. And then we came up with the hashtag feelin' hip and put it out there. And our goal was to raise $5,000 for Team Fiona. And then like a month and a half later, we're at the zoo giving them a check for $50,000. And so we just became the go-to spot for all things Fiona. From that point on, it was our queen.
Because you probably crushed their numbers.
Crushed everybody's numbers.
Yep.
Everybody's numbers.
And so what that proves is there's something you're doing. Could you put a finger on it? Did you know why, in looking back, do you know why your numbers were much more significant than even the zoo?
So I think it's a lot of things. And no, I don't for sure, because if I did, I would just replicate it over and over again, which we've done a pretty good job of. But our whole thing is we embrace the digital printing concept and technology before a lot of other people did. And what that has afforded us to do with pretty much everything in terms of apparel is it lets you throw a lot of stuff against the wall to see what sticks. Because
small numbers.
If you sell one, you print one.
Yeah.
Right? Mm-hmm. You're not on the hook for a bunch of inventory that now what am I going to do with? I'll be lucky to get my money back. Now it's try it, see what works.
Why were you one of the first to adopt digital?
I don't know. I think it's become a lot more affordable, but at the time it was a giant investment. And I think that we figured out, we had built a mechanism. A lot of the people that were doing shirt decorating in town, their whole thing is based off of bulk and numbers, right? They're not creating their own brand. They're offering a service to schools and businesses, who say like, I have a 5K coming up and I need 1,000 runner shirts. Who can give me the best price? We're saying, let's grow a brand so that instead of when we print a shirt, we sell it to someone else for $7 and it costs us $5.50. Let's print a shirt for $5.50 and sell it for $25. Right? That's where it is. Let's use this technology not to print stuff for other people, but to print it for ourselves, because when we make a sale, our margin is a lot higher than when we sell to someone else.
Whatever it is you're selling. Let's just make sure when we make the sale.
For sure.
Now, the difficulty is you have to make a lot more sales, because if you make that one sale and you sell 3,000 of them at a small margin, you're getting $5 or $6 grand profit. Right. So what you now have to do is you have to make a lot of sales. If you're going to make $18.50 or $19 a shirt, you have to go out and sell every single time.
Right.
Unless you can establish a brand.
Right. Which is what our goal was to establish a brand, which is why we ended up being a block south or 2 units south of Central Parkway and not at the banks or somewhere else, because our goal in mind was we don't want to rely on who's walking by that goes, oh, what's this place? We wanted to be a destination. We have always wanted Cincy Shirts to be a destination. We wanted to get to a point where we could put a store somewhere and people are excited that we're coming there, not what is this, right? And so
why did you get back to that thought, but when you said in the beginning, I'm going all the way back to when we first sat down.
Yeah.
You're like, but I hope it's not our biggest brand.
Yes. Well, because you think like you see what we've been able to do with just Cincinnati. And when you compare Cincinnati to other cities, it's like I think any entrepreneur goes, I want to have a Cincy Shirts in Cincinnati. I want to have a Cleveland Shirts. I want to have a Pittsburgh Shirts. I want to have a Milwaukee Shirts. But we knew that we couldn't create a website for every single one of those. We needed to create a secondary brand that had the potential to grow other cities to be close to what we've grown Cincinnati. So that's how Old School Shirts was born. So Old School Shirts is one of our other brands. And if you go there, you can click on any of those cities I just mentioned and see all the vintage and apparel we've created for those cities on one site instead of having to manage a site for every other city.
All right, so here's the unlock in those cities if you're able to pull it off. Does it feel the same for those cities?
It doesn't, because there's not but it doesn't have to either.
Okay. But it could.
It could.
It'd be the best if it was, but you two aren't there.
we're not there. So what I did initially is I reached out to my comedian friends who are from Milwaukee and Pittsburgh and Cleveland, and I showed them Cincy Shirts, and I go, this was our old grocery store. This was our old amusement park ride. This was the face of the weather that everybody tuned into. What is that for Cleveland? What is that for Milwaukee? And then I paid them to fill out a spreadsheet that had all the ideas that got Cincy Shirts started for these other cities. And then the job was, okay, yes, that's an iconic Milwaukee brand, but they're still in business. And so unless we get a license from them, we can't print that. I need to find the places that are long gone, that the trademark's expired, but still when I show someone who grew up in Chicago, if I show them this, they'll go, I loved that store. That's what I want. And that can be replicated even if I don't have the same attachment to it, right? But then there's also Midwest brands that, Hills or Burger Chef or Zantigo. Like there were places that were chains.
Hit multiple cities.
Yeah. Music Land. There's a million of them that, okay, now we have this design that was huge in Cincinnati, but it wasn't just huge in Cincinnati. So now we can put that in all these other cities. So there's all these brands. Now let's look at defunct sports leagues, okay? Cincy had the Rockers, the indoor football team. All right, so what were the other teams in that league? Okay, Milwaukee had a team. Those are all expired, so now we have sports stuff for all these other cities without having to really do any research.
What was the basketball movie with Will Ferrell?
Oh, where the Flint Tropics, yeah, semi-pro,
something like that,
semi-pro,
right? Same type of thing.
But see, like that might be trademarked by Warner Brothers or somebody.
I get it. But that idea in sports,
yes, for sure.
Yeah.
So we were able to come up with enough to launch Old School Shirts in other cities, and then I'm proud to say, like that brand is come on strong in the last couple of years, where we've now got licensing. Negro League Baseball Museum. So now we have all these cool old Negro League designs that are licensed.
There's some cool designs.
Evel Knievel's estate. We had done one shirt for Cincy Shirts from when Evel Knievel jumped over like the 12 tour buses in the parking lot at Kings Island. That got on their radar where they're like, hey, you can't do that. And so we were like, well, let's just work together then. So not only did we get that design license, now Old School Shirts has an entire Evel Knievel license, which is so fun for me.
It's fun.
It's like and so that stuff isn't Cincinnati specific, but it still evokes that same emotion from me and other people who see it and are instantly taken back to a point in their life that of a memory. Like that's one of the coolest things about having a store for Cincy Shirts that we didn't get to experience until we had a physical location, was someone coming in and seeing a Johnny's Toys shirt and going, let me tell you a story about Johnny's Toys, right? Or my dad was a security guard at Swallens, or whatever it is. Like we get that all the time, and there's is the coolest feeling.
Do you guys have? Do you still have? How many locations do you have?
So we have 2 now. We recently shut down OTR because the space wasn't really conducive for the digital printing setup we do now. So we have one right down the street here in Fort Mitchell. That's our new store we opened last year, and it's doing amazing.
Yep.
We still have Hyde Park, and then we hope to get back downtown when the right spot opens up. But then we're also looking at a couple other spots in the city, and it's just cool to even talk like that because. I do feel like the brand has gotten to a point now through the Super Bowl run and Fiona and FC Cincinnati and all the stuff we've been able to do with the Reds, Children's Hospital, and I want to dial back to that, but we've gotten the reach now. So that when we do something, people know about it.
So what would be special? I don't know if you guys have it, but you should record those moments that when they come in your store, dude. There should be a seat and a mic and a camera.
Yeah, like a little confessional kind of booth. Yeah.
I think
that would be cool.
Because I think those stories on your guys' site,
yeah,
that could hit really big.
Well, one thing we did in Fort Mitchell, which is really cool, if you go to our Fort Mitchell store.
Where is it?
It's on Dixie Highway in the old Rimke Plaza.
Yep.
We're right next to Jersey Mike's and Hit Seekers baseball cards in front of Braxton Brewery. If you go in there, we've created a little bit of a wall of fame. That is 2 things. It's candid photos of people who've come in or moments in the company's history, so like when, Joey Votto pops in the store, or presenting the check at the zoo, or whatever it is. We've kind of captured those photos, and they kind of speak for themselves. But then along the wall and then down the hallway, we have framed T-shirts that are iconic moments in our company's history. And then there's a photo that goes with them, and then a little paragraph that gives context to what it was. So the Fiona shirt, 2 years ago when Nick Castellanos was on the Reds team, and his son drew a picture of him on a T-shirt that he wore on the carpet at the All-Star game, and people were asking what the shirt was, and he said, "This was my son's birthday gift to me." He let us replicate that design, and within 24 hours it was for sale in the Reds team shop. He let his son pick the Dragonfly Foundation as a recipient of a cut from the sales, and so we were able to raise $20,000 for the Dragonfly. That he ended up matching, and presented them a check at the game. And so
you have those special moments happening
for sure.
And document.
I think Devin Still was probably the first that comes to mind.
The Bengals with him and his daughter.
Yeah, with his daughter. So we did a shirt that said "Still Strong" to raise money. And he got on board with that. Came to our store, helped us get the word out. That's where I think it. And then from there, it went to Lauren Hill. And the Cure Starts Now, the
Mount St. Joe
basketball player, and then just it sort of branched out from there. So we ended up doing some stuff for Carlos Dunlap's foundation, and then fast forward to today, between the zoo, which we've raised over $300,000 for Team Fiona, including the money that we donated to the Australian wildfires to their sister zoo over there. So between the zoo, the Reds Community Fund, all the different athletes with their own foundations or the foundations that they're passionate about, Children's Hospital, Ronald McDonald House, Dragonfly, there's so many. We've donated over $1 million to date to local organizations, and that's something that we really hang our hat on. And then most recently with the Damar Hamlin, Darren and I were at the game when that happened with our sons, and before we were even out of the stadium, his GoFundMe drive had gone viral, right? Where he was raising money to get toys for like inner city kids. And we donated while we were still in the stadium, and I think at that point the total was like $7,000 or something. And then
within an hour or two.
Yeah, it's over like 200,000. I mean, it was insane. Mm-hmm. And so we were kind of having the discussion there of like, our whole thing is there's two things. One is like, we never want to come across as like, I don't know what the right word is, like making money off of something that doesn't involve us, so in moments like that, if we do something, we say, it's going to be all the profits. It's not going to be a portion. So like when people got shot on Fountain Square and we were raising money for the police and the victims, we never felt like there was a scenario where we should make any money off of that. It was a Cincinnati strong. It was a rally together. This is a terrible thing that hit our community, but we don't feel right. Other times if we partner with people, it's like we'll give a percentage, but we still have to run a business. There's other times where it doesn't feel right. This was one of those times, but we also felt like we didn't have to put any eyeballs on a cause. Like the Damar Hamlin thing, everybody knew about it. What are we going to do, right? But we had, and I'm proud of it, we have developed such a reputation here locally that we were getting hit on social media. What is Cincy Shirts going to do? And then it got to a point where it was like, are we kind of jerks if we don't do something?
It's a lot of pressure now.
Yeah. And so that's how the designs were born. We contacted Kevin Necessary from local artist who had done an image of the two mascots both kneeling in prayer. Just an amazing image. Then our internal team came up with a design that was a 5-1-3. The 5 and the 1 were in black and orange, and then the 3 was in the Buffalo Bills colors because that's his number. And then there was one other one that I'm drawing a blank of, but we were like, okay, we're going to release these, and then all of the proceeds are going to go to the charity.
How do we? So,
and it was $75,000 was what we raised in about 5 days from having that conversation and deciding to move forward with it. 4 days later, NFL Network, Sunday morning, Michael Irvin, Kurt Warner, James Brown, and Steve Mariucci are sitting at the desk wearing our T-shirts. 4 days later. And then Cooperstown, the Pro Football Hall of Fame in Canton requested Ted Karras's shirt that he wore of that in the interview that he did at his locker. Like, we have a shirt in Cooperstown. I'm doing interviews with TMZ. Like, that's the kind of stuff that keeps us going, where it's like we can be so specific to do Cincinnati apparel and get mentioned in the New York Times or on TMZ or the NFL Network, Lester Holt sitting there on the TV with our drawing of Fiona over his left shoulder.
What's all that stuff mean? So all these people, what's it mean to you?
It's a feeling that I get it from stand-up and I get it from T-shirts, which is really weird to say, but it's a feeling that will never go away. That if I go to a Reds game or I'm walking around downtown and I see someone wearing a Cincy shirt, it gives me the exact same feeling as it did when we first started the company, of like just the feeling that like you created something that is part of culture in some capacity.
And it feels good.
Yeah.
And it should.
Yeah. So I have a joke on my Comedy Central special. It's a true story about farting on Jessica Simpson on an airplane. My mom's real proud. But I had an incident with her. She was not kind to me. When we were deplaning, she was behind me. I felt a pain in my stomach. I saw it as a bit of revenge for the way I'd been treated. And so I would tell this story about how I farted on Jessica Simpson. It picks up enough steam that I put it in my Comedy Central special and makes it onto the album. And and so this is probably 2015. I'm in Anaheim, California. I'm at Star Wars Celebration. I am the biggest Star Wars nerd. Obviously goes back to my childhood. I'm walking around Star Wars Celebration. There are 60,000 people there, most of whom are dressed up as some character. I'm dressed like this. And I'm just like walking around looking at the different vendors, and someone taps me on the shoulder. And I turn around and he says, and he's like, "Did you fart on Jessica Simpson?" And I just get this giant smile, and I was like, "Yeah." And he goes, "I knew that was you." And I was like, "Hey man, how's it going?" I go, "Have we met before?" And he goes, "No." He goes, "I love stand-up comedy, and I listen to it on Pandora all day. And whenever they have a track playing, they have the album that it comes from as the image on the screen. And my face on that album, Unacceptable, it's literally just my face. It's like, that's the whole album cover." He goes, "I have seen your face so many times, and you're my favorite comedian." And I was like, you don't know how much this means to me. Like, to be here with all of these people dressed ridiculous, like that someone would know me like in that moment. And even if that's the only time that it would ever happen in my entire life, like you know what I mean? Like, it's moments like that where you're just like, dude, what else could you do that would make you feel like this?
Yeah, that's probably special. What were you at Disneyland?
No, we were at the Anaheim Convention Center.
Okay,
yeah.
They probably held it there. I mean,
yeah.
I guess maybe they didn't own, because I think they
owned it. Yeah, okay. It was all Disney still.
Okay, got it.
That's why it was there.
So shirts make you feel the same as comedy.
It really does, because I would go back to this is a fun story. I don't even know how we're doing on time. Are we good on time?
You limited on time?
No, I got 1,000 years.
Guys, we limited on time? Let's go.
All right. So, early days of Cincy Shirts. we're like, how are we going to let people know that we exist, right? So for a while, what we were doing was we would fill our pockets with business cards that just had the website on it. And then we would stand outside the Reds game the way that people give away like schedules and stuff. We would stand outside the Reds games and be like, here, check out these, these funny Cincinnati shirts. Give them out as much as we could. And most of the time people would just walk right by you and whatever. We were just like, we got to do something different. And so the following season, it's opening day. And we're like, let's print like 25 T-shirts and we'll go to Fountain Square for the parade. And we'll give away T-shirts and we'll take pictures of people in the shirts. And we got all these business cards to hand out. So we go down to the square and we're like, all right, the only rule is if we give you a free T-shirt, you got to put it on and let us take a picture. They were gone. It was 25 shirts for like
yeah, I'm like, why 4,000
people? That was all we could afford. And so we we hand them out. We get the pictures. Now we've got all these postcards and now nobody wants the postcard. Like we're like, oh man, this sucks. Like this is what actually has our website on it. And so I notice that the parade's going by, that after like a car in the parade would go by, people would cross the street before the next car comes. And that no one was paying attention to the people crossing the street. And I go, all right, Darren, here's what we're going to do. Give me a bunch of the cards. You take a bunch of cards. I said, I'm going to act like I'm crossing the street. And then instead of getting on the sidewalk, I'm just going to walk. Because the police have no idea who's part of the parade. Because there's like a car, but then there's also 7 people walking next to the car waving. And so he's like, are you sure? I was like, let's do it. Who cares? So I act like I'm crossing the street with the crowd. And then instead of hopping up on the sidewalk, I just pivot. And I just start walking with the parade. And he hops into the street and does the same thing. Now there are hands taking whatever people in the parade are giving away. So now I'm just going, you get a card? You get a card? You get a card? And in 3 blocks, we got rid of every business card. And then the sales just went
I was going to say,
crazy.
Did you track your website traffic then?
Yeah.
Yeah.
So we crashed the opening day parade. That was kind of like our first.
And no one knew.
No one knew. But I look back at that, and I just remember the feeling that I had that day of like, oh my God, somebody's wearing one of our shirts. Like we would do these YouTube videos, and they'd be based off of like the 2 sales we got that week. Like if a sale came through in a day, it was a big deal.
It was a video.
Yeah.
So what do you take away from, like, we operate businesses, you and I.
Mm-hmm.
And we hope there's like 3 people that listen to this are operating businesses.
Yep.
What do we need to make sure that we still, maybe you're still creative, maybe that still happens, but what's the principle? What's the underlying principle here?
I think it's to maintain not just a pulse of the people that you're serving, but also be front and center in front of them so that they know who's serving it to them, right? I talked about FC Cincinnati and how we were printing shirts, we were selling them as fast as we could print them. As we grew as a company, I think this sort of misnomer grew about us that like people who were introduced us are like, oh yeah, they have got like 2 stores and they've got a huge following on social media. They're like a huge T-shirt company, right? And there was sort of this disconnect that we lost, that we had between like the hardcore fans that we were always trying to serve and what their perception of us was and what the actual reality was, right? And then it almost became like this, no, we're going to support the little guy. We're not going to support the big brand. It's like we were the little guy.
It's like hold on, wait a minute,
5
guys.
years ago.
Yeah.
So
even having your finger on the pulse of that, because as I'm sitting here, I'm like, you guys are just market research guys.
Yes, but we're also, like we built our following on social media because we were clearly knowledgeable of the content, right? I think that's the struggle with old school shirts is if it's going to succeed, it's going to succeed because we figured out the formula for the ad. It's not because we have like intimate knowledge of the content matter and the history of the people that, like, we can't say like, hey, we grew up in Milwaukee too, the way that we can say that about Cincinnati.
So the ad.
Right. So the ad is what will drive the success of everything else. For Cincy Shirts specifically, and I also believe it goes the same for me as a comedian, is that I'm putting my face out there. Darren is putting his face out there as we are the owners and we are accessible, and it's still us. It was us in the beginning and it's still us today. So if you have an issue or if there's something that you would like to do, you can talk to us. I think that's why as a kid that like someone on a commercial as a local business owner to me was a celebrity, right? It was because I equated them of like, oh, that's the guy from that.
Like Buddy's Carpet.
Yeah.
Right?
Or the King Quick. You remember King Quick? Are you old enough?
No, I'm 44, but I don't. I'm a Northern
I
Kentucky
barely
guy,
remember
though,
King Quick.
What's King Quick?
It was a
store?
local. It was a local convenience store chain, but the guy that owned it did commercials with like a mirror. So it was the King Quick twins, but it was the same guy. But people always thought there were two of him.
So it's the ad. So how much of it has to be like the shirt you're wearing today? I can tell that is actually a soft T-shirt.
Yeah,
right.
It's been washed a bunch.
But I mean, just that's important to me.
Yeah.
To get something soft. I don't know when that craze started, but the first time I ever had it was a Wife is Good shirt.
Yeah.
And I got it at the beach somewhere, and I was like, man, the actual shirt is awesome.
Yeah.
So the product, I mean, you're going to back it up and say you have a good product, but the product has to be good too, right?
Correct. And that was when the transition in what I would say the T-shirt industry switched from funny pop culture references to vintage throwback. Check out this T-shirt that I've had for 20 years. So it was like you had to find a blank that felt old, and then you could do the design to make it look like a design that had cracked. I mean, you're wearing one right now.
Yep.
Like I know that pivot shirt isn't from the 80s.
It could,
but it looks like it could
because I wear it every day.
Yeah. But you get what I'm saying? So like you could cheat on the design. You just have to find a shirt that felt as old as the design looked. And so there's a lot of options out there for that.
How many people, what are your percentage of sales in store versus online?
It's evened out.
No way.
Yeah, which is crazy.
That is wild. So I like to hear that based on the question as I'm thinking as a consumer. How many people buy it based on what's on the shirt versus the material and what it feels like?
I think they know they can get how it feels. They can buy that shirt as a blank if they want it. It's up to us to decorate it in a way that they're like, I want that design on this shirt.
So can I do that if I come into your store?
Yeah.
So if I go in the Fort Mitchell store,
Yep.
I'm like, I want that color, that washed, that feel, and can you put this design on it?
Yes. So at Fort Mitchell, you can, any of our brands, Old School Shirts, In the Clutch, which is our newest brand, it focuses on more modern sports as well. Old School focuses on vintage. So we have a Major League Baseball Players Association license. So, all the current, and we're hoping to get an NFL Players Association license, but that's more like current day athletes. So Old School Shirts, In the Clutch, Cincy Shirts, and then our newest brand, Dressing Festive, which is like holiday themed apparel for every holiday. Any of it. You can go to our store, say, I would like this design printed on a red, and we'll pull off a shirt that is got a good soft feel to it. It's what we use for all the stock you see in the store, and they'll print it for you while you wait. And that saved our retail.
See, there you go. So it's like embroidery on hats were, right? You come in and you get a shirt, and it's like, I'll do it for you right now.
Yes.
Yep.
Because it's the guesswork that we had to do when we were doing screen printing in the very, very early days. It's like, all right, so to do this design, we got to print 24. It's not going to be worth it. So let's do 2 small and 4 medium and 10 large, whatever. And then sure enough, we would sell out a 4 medium.
Yep.
And you're like, all right, well, now we're either not going to offer it on medium or we're going to have to print another 24, but we still have all these small, large, and XLs on the shelf. And it was like that dance of like, what do you do? So now it's like, all right, we know these are going to sell, or this is the hottest shirt, or this is what people are buying, or this is 4th of July. Let's put that out right now, and we'll have just a small stack of one of each size. And then if we run out of that size or someone comes in and says, I want this one, It's like, all right, well, we'll just make that one for you. So we have enough of the popular stuff. If we know something's going to go off, Joe Burrow better get those refunds. Every news station sharing it. It's on social media, blowing up. All right, we're going to have these on hand, or else we're going to have a line out the door, people waiting on us to print one shirt at a time.
How long does it take if I walk in the store and you guys aren't busy? I'm like, can I get that shirt with that
Less
image?
than 10 minutes.
No way.
It saved our retail.
Yep.
Because it's like, especially at OTR, which is such a crapshoot between tourists and people working down there and the locals. It's like, who knows what we should have stock of? How about we just have a bunch of blanks and we'll print whatever you want when you come in? It saved everything. And now we're replicating that model.
Is it profitable enough that you can do this in multiple cities?
It is if we grow enough of a brand in other cities. I think Old School Shirts could become a brand that because there's always going to be something that's new today is going to be vintage one day, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so I'm thinking about the next generation, these things that you're talking about for us. Well, what do the 25-year-olds, what's vintage to them?
Right.
Are your 45, 46-year-old brains good enough to know that?
We have some people have children that are tapped into it. We have lots of research we can do.
Like, what are you doing for Taylor Swift and Cincy next weekend?
So we have Cincinnati, and then in parentheses, Taylor's version. Some of this, that's the other beauty of once you get to the point where you're an established brand and you have a reach on social media is people come to you.
Look, that's like I just said.
And so, we've been watching obviously social media, like you should do a shirt, they say it all the time. When Cincy Shirts going to do a shirt about Ellie De La Cruz or whatever. But, we've been watching it for Taylor Swift, and my favorite one was Cincinnati. Somebody said we should do a Cincinnati shirt. And it's like, I would never have thought of that, But when you see 100 likes on the comment, you're like, okay, well, here it is. And if you want it, we'll print it. And if you don't, we won't print it. Our only cost now is the time it took to create that design.
So what do you think, do you and your partner, co-founder, do you guys have business meetings?
Yes. We have one every Monday, company-wide, 9 a.m., Zoom with everybody. So we get an update from the designers. We get an update from customer service and social and PR. We get an update from the warehouse, which we are transitioning over to another company to take over our printing and shipping for online orders. We've come full circle because we can't keep up in our busiest times. So during a Super Bowl run or a shirt that goes viral, we can't have days anymore where Darren and me and the designers and the social media person and our spouses and our children are coming in to help keep up with orders and people are unhappy. We need to give that to a company.
And then hold them accountable for it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That can keep up, but also can keep up with it.
Yep.
The highs and the lows so that we can focus on our strengths.
Those meetings, what's the biggest problem? What's the biggest cog in the way? What's the biggest thing happening on those calls right now? Guys, we have to figure this out from a business entrepreneur perspective.
Well, that's the thing. Right now, it's the headaches of switching over our production and fulfillment to a company that isn't familiar with our brand the way that our employees are. But, I think it even comes down to, your own employees. And we've gotten to a very sweet spot where we love our team and we hope that our team wants to be here, but you got to go through some rotten eggs, you know what I mean, to get there. Whether that's on us or on the person that's no longer with the company is, debatable probably in a lot of cases, but you have to find people who have at least the same vision as you or understand your vision to be able to execute it. But even those people, right? Darren and I say this all the time. You will never, ever find someone to be as passionate about your business as you are about your business.
Why not?
It's just not possible.
Why not?
Because they don't have the vested interest that you do. They can succeed as your company succeeds, but no one's going to come, like, no T-shirt company is going to come pull Darren and I away with an offer, right, for us to leave behind our company and go work for them instead. Like, best case scenario would be that we were to sell the company, right?
For millions and millions. Yeah.
But that's everybody's end goal. That's a business
you're
owner.
All in. There's no question of your loyalty and dedication.
But our designers, our salespeople, our social media and customer service, our warehouse workers, they could get an offer today that's like, I love you guys, but I can't turn this down, right?
Yep.
And so
the battle of running businesses, right?
Right. So we try to
incentivize.
Right. Because we know we're a company that is not 9 to 5. And it's not just not 9 to 5 for Darren and I. It's not 9 to 5 for our designers. It's not 9 to 5 for our social media. We're ideating at 10 o'clock at night after something just happened at a Reds game. We're chatting on our Google chat at 11 p.m. on a Saturday night about what can we do to get this in store on a Sunday. You know what I mean?
Yep. Are you using any overseas talent for that?
We do sometimes. We'll outsource some design work if we have to. But again, we've gone through 15 people before we found somebody that has the aesthetic that we're looking for. And when you do, you're just like, here's a list. Start working on this list because we're going to be working on this happened today. We need it tomorrow. This is stuff we know we're going to need. So just knock it out as you can.
How do you guys think, what has scaling been like to you? The struggle, the figuring it out, right? Because that's what you're talking about is old school shirts and all these other cities and stuff. It's like, because if you had 2 more of you could rubber stamp this thing 30 times across the country,
God
man.
Save us. I don't know if you could. Like, I think you just, like, Cincy Shirts is at a such sweet spot where if we have an idea and we just put it out there, the news is going to see it. The customer base is going to see it. It has a chance to go viral on social media by just putting it out there organically, right? If you can get to a point with those other brands, then it's just about content. It's literally just about how many ideas can you come up with. Because I just need that printer running nonstop. I don't care if it's printing the same design 100 times or 100 designs one time. I just need it printing, right? That's when you can become scalable. And when we've now outsourced that to another company who has unlimited funds, we're operating out of a warehouse with 2, maybe 3 physical printers, one person running 2 or 3 physical printers. When you turn that over to someone who's got a farm of 50 printers and they're like, throw us as much as you want. And if we can't handle it, we'll buy another 50. That's where you get to the point where it's scalable. So now, once we are confident that the honeymoon, the hiccups, of like getting them going, we know the process of getting the new designs into their system. That's when we put the pedal down and just say,
ideas
sell.
Ideas and ads then? Is that it?
Yeah.
Ideas and ads.
Yeah.
How has this gotten in the way of your comedy?
It's totally gotten in the way of my comedy.
Well, that sounds like a bunch of bullshit.
In the best possible way.
But you're going to be in Louisville on August 23rd. How do you still – because do you need to make sure you shake the rust off all the time?
So here's been the setup and this all goes back to where we started, right? My son will be 12 in 2 weeks. My daughter turned 7 2 weeks ago. When my son was born, my wife worked for a couple years and then decided to stay at home. So the social media stuff that I do for Perfetti, the comedy, and the T-shirt company, in the aggregate, afford us the opportunity for her to not have to have a full-time job. So that's been huge, and it's stayed the same since my daughter was born. And she's now at an age where she's a little more self-sustainable. So my wife kind of has that itch of like, I want to be doing something because I'm not needed 24 hours a day by them. Probably 6 or 7 years ago, I started taking summers off. It started out as to coach Little League. I thought, my wife and my daughter's birthday are the first week of June. You have Father's Day, you have 4th of July, then you have my son's birthday. We usually end up on some kind of family vacation, all in June or July. why am I trying to find one comedy gig on some random weekend in June to work when I could just be present and say, you know what, from mid-May to mid-August, I'm not doing any stand-up. And so I've been able to do that, right? So the T-shirt company and the social media stuff have afforded me the ability for my wife not to work. Now I don't have to work summers. Okay. So now let's look at the rest of the year outside of the summer. Well, you've got Christmas and Thanksgiving, and you've got Easter, you've got our anniversary, you've got Bengals home games because I'm taking my boy to the games, you know. So New Year's sucks for comedy. So now we're down another 2 months worth of weekends that I've said I'm not going to work because it's just I'd rather be home than work. Okay? Now what's left? Now my comedy hat goes on and I say, okay, here's what I have left to fill with comedy dates. I know a handful of those are going to be corporate gigs, right? I know a handful of those are going to be club gigs. And then the other dates, let's just see what gets offered to me at the last minute or if something pops up. And so that's how I handle comedy. And what it's done is I only do the gigs I really want to do, or they're gigs that I absolutely cannot turn down. And it's kept it fun. Here I am 25 and a half years later after my first open mic night, 22 years removed from walking out the door at Procter Gamble on Friday the 13th of July, 2001. And I still love to do it because I don't have to do it, you know? Now I feel like the frequency with which I'm putting out new material has suffered because the creative juices are going to other places, but there's a give and a take there, right? You know, I look at the people that I started with, my peers, some of my best friends, they're on the Daily Show now. They're doing consistent appearances on the Tonight Show. They're headlining in theaters, right? But that came with sacrifices that, you know, are part of their personal life, but that I have not had to deal with because I thought that was more important, you know. And Dave Chappelle said something that changed my entire outlook on life, but especially about comedy. He was on Inside the Actors Studio, and they asked him what it was like when he told his parents that he wanted to do comedy. Now, his parents were both college professors, and so they did not take it well, and they thought it was a phase. And they said, well, will you give it up if you're not successful? And his response to them was, that is determined by, that depends on what your definition of success is. You know, he says, if a teacher makes $40,000 a year and I can make $40,000 a year doing comedy, I'd rather be a stand-up than a teacher. And that really, when I heard that, it really hit me hard because, you know, I lived in LA and I moved out there to become the next whatever in comedy. And then I moved back because my manager thought it was important for me not to be seen too soon out there by important people. And 6 months after I moved home, I got selected for the biggest comedy festival in the world in Montreal, the Just for Laughs Festival. And then a month after that, I did my first TV appearance on Premium Blend on Comedy Central. And I had only been home 6 months, and I was like, well, I'm not going to move right back. So I'll just stay here a year and then see. Maybe I'll go to New York. I had a buddy that was on SNL. Maybe I'm going to go to New York and try it there instead. Or maybe I'll go back to California. Well, the next year I got my half-hour special. And then the next year I got my record deal. And then the year after that I was, you know, touring with the Blue Collar Guys. Every credit that I have in comedy, I got while I lived here. You know, the industry completely changed from where I have to see you to, well, just send me a YouTube link and I can watch it, right? And so in that time, I built my family here, and I've built a business here with my best friend. And so while I've sacrificed like possible greater comedy goals, I've achieved so much more personally, financially. I mean, my house, if I wanted my house in California, I mean, it would
$3
be
to $5
like,
million bucks or something.
Easily.
Yeah.
And it's like, I'm okay with that. You know, I'm okay not being recognized everywhere I go and still having a successful career in the entertainment industry because like I remember when we lived in Westchester, the day we moved in, we were in this little cul-de-sac and all the neighbors came out to introduce themselves to us, and everybody's introducing themselves. And this guy that worked at P&G was living across the street. And he's like, so what do you do? And my wife's like, I work at, the University of Dayton. And they're like, how about you? And I said, I'm a comedian. And he's like, what else do you do? And I was like, well, and this is when Cincy Shirts was just starting out. I was like, oh, we have a t-shirt company, but comedy is my main thing. And he goes, you can make a living doing that? And I said, I bought a house on your street. And everybody, and I said it, I didn't say it as I said it as a joke, as a smart
Everybody
ass.
laughed.
But everybody laughed, and he laughed, and he kind of was like, yeah, I guess so.
But you may have ruined the next months of his life.
I want him to. I want people to think about that.
Right. Yeah.
I want people to not have, like assumptions about you, or I'd like to have the opportunity to dispel them, because there are a lot. They live here. There's some that live here. There are a lot of really funny, successful entertainers that you have never heard of. If I'm on an airplane and comedy comes up, I try at all costs not to, because I know how it's going to go. I love talking about it, but I play this little game where I tell people I make up some occupation, and then I see if I can talk about it the whole flight.
That they believe you.
Yeah, I'm going to Omaha for this,
whatever conference.
Magician supply.
Are they all in? Like, really, man? Like, tell me about that.
It's a fun game for me. But but if it comes up and I say, who's your favorite comedians? It's never guys that I know. It's never guys that do what I do. It's
mine is
Jerry Seinfeld, and it's like giant names.
My favorite, though. Mm-hmm. Who do you think my favorite would be?
So
I've just tipped you off.
You said you listen to Rogan.
Yep.
I'm gonna say Tom Segura.
No, man, come on, man.
Well, he's great.
Bill Burr.
Well, Bill Burr is amazing too.
What? Man,
I've known Bill forever.
Okay. He's angry.
But he isn't.
Okay, but here's what I'm going to tell you. I love him. What makes him so damn good, dude? I just laugh.
Yeah.
What is it?
It's just this dance that, like, you find the rhythm. I'm always very, like, people, that's what I get a lot, right? It's like, you don't act like a comedian. Like, I thought you'd be like, trying to be funny, and I don't think most comedians are like. Bert Kreischer is like that, that's his thing, and he's amazing, and no one does it better than him.
Rips off the T-shirt on stage, with a big gut and all that.
Right,
drinks his life away.
I'm observational. I'm the guy I'm in a group and I'm like listening and watching, and it's not because I'm disengaged or I don't want to be there. It's just that's my style. I'm a listener, right?
You're like, I bought my house here.
And Bill is prolific. He can just crank stuff out. He has an eye for his style. That's when I kind of hit the next gear, is when I figured out what my style was. I went through a phase where I was trying to be edgy, trying to be shocking.
Trying to be someone else.
Silly, do voices, And I've got this thing that people come up to me after a show and they're like, man, it's like you're just talking. It's like you're just a dude on my couch hanging out. That's what I want. I don't want people to be in the room thinking they're at a comedy show. I want them to be in there thinking that we're all just hanging out, telling stories.
I watched a couple of your clips before we came on today, and I was like, the art, it's timing.
That's my favorite thing.
The art of your pause, dude.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's good. That's what I want to hear.
Yep. And I only watched 2. I was like, this dude's got it.
Because my biggest influences were, when it comes to that, people call it a device or whatever, but, Wendy Liebman, the Smothers Brothers, Ron White, their timing. They know exactly when to deliver the next line. They know exactly how long to let silence go. When I told that Jessica Simpson story at my Comedy Central special, it was the first time my manager had ever heard it. And he goes, they were eating out of your hand. He was like, you could have heard a pin drop. And I think part of that has to be, you have to be comfortable with silence, which I love silence, because silence to me at a comedy show means I've got them. If they're talking and chatting with each other or heckling, I've lost them. That's the wrong kind of silence. If it's super quiet and they're waiting on my next word, I know that I can take that audience wherever I want. And that's like a feeling that Like it's just like it's like Zen, you know what I mean? Like you're just on this other plane of like I can do whatever I want right now.
I saw the smile inside of you on those pauses. I was like, oh, he's smiling.
Yeah.
Yeah, and you were just like deadpan, dude. You're just like waiting. And I was like, oh, he's smiling.
But that's my style. I mean, that's me, I think, off stage too. Is like I'm like under my breath, like this is what I would say.
Mm-hmm. And then when do you hit him with it? Yeah, with Burr, he's just got these rants, man.
He's so good. I mean, there's no one better.
Is that really your? So what I feel in my sense, like, man, that guy's awesome.
Yes,
because he's mean too at times. He's really mean.
But his brain it's like
it's firing like this, man.
And this has been his passion, like right, like this has been he has put in more work than anyone else.
And it's evident.
So his brain is like his comedy brain is the guy at the gym, right? Who is just like jacked, right?
Is he like this when you're hanging out with him?
He can be. Oh yeah, for sure. His voice makes me like that's the other thing, right? Like is like so Bill. Again, we're dipping back into a Star Wars tangent, but Bill had some appearances on the Mandalorian show. Okay, and I'm part of a giant group of collectors of autographs for Star Wars. So our group arranges private signings with Harrison Ford and people like that to get photos and other things signed. And so a lot of people do these cast pieces where they'll take a poster from one of the movies and they'll try to get every person that they can from the cast. So they're doing that with The Mandalorian. And of course they want Bill Burr on there. So if I'm the call that they make to go, hey, can you get us a signing with Bill Burr? So I've run into him up at Chappelle's farm.
In Yellow Springs or wherever.
Yeah. It was him and Brian Regan were doing a show, and Dave was hosting, and I was there that night. It was incredible. I mean, those are 3 of my 4 Mount Rushmore of comedians. And so I'm talking to him about it after the show. He's like, yeah, let me know. Maybe we'll do it. We find a day or whatever. And so I don't think about it for a while. And then out of the blue, I'm in Arizona. I'm on my way to the comedy club, and his number shows up on my phone, Bill Burr. And I'm like, hey, man, what's up? And the first thing out of his mouth, so, like, am I going to be, like, signing lightsabers or something? Like, and it's like a bit, like it's him just talking to me for no one else, but it sounds like stand-up comedy material. And I'm, like, cracking up laughing at him, like, literally just asking, like, logistics questions about how a private signing would go. He's just that good. Nate Bargatze is that good. Jim Gaffigan is that good. Like there's guys that are just like it is so effortless for them.
But what all of us, it's what we talked about in the beginning. A lot of people are like, well, Josh, it's an overnight success, right, man? Like it's so easy for you. It's like those guys have decades.
Mm-hmm.
They've been working at this thing for thousands and tens of thousands of hours.
For sure.
Right? And that
I mean, I'm at 10,000 hours in
right?
stand-up, so imagine what they are.
25,000, 30,000, 40,000. If you do anything, what I found in life, you do anything that long, man, you got a shot at being great.
Absolutely.
So stick with it, right? That's the message of entrepreneurship, of comedy, of like think about how you're probably a better dad now for the 12 and 7-year-old than in the beginning.
Right.
Right?
Right, and you alluded to it earlier, and it's the total truth with them. It's that I had a bar set so high for me that I feel like I have to do whatever I can to leave that kind of an impact, and hope that they will feel that same way too. Right? That's if that's what I can pass on is like a work ethic, and be the kind of person that people remember fondly. Like that's why you should do it, like not to bring like religion and everything else. Like things should not be done out of fear. You should not do something good because you're worried something bad will happen to you if you don't. You should do it because it's the right thing to do, right?
Simple.
Whatever it is you're doing, do it knowing that you can go to sleep that night, that if it didn't work out, say, I thought I was doing the right thing, whether that's for me professionally, for me personally, decisions that I make as a father or as a husband, as long as I can sleep at night knowing that I did what I thought was the right thing to do, that was why I left P&G in the first place, right? I never wanted to be at a point in my life where I look back and said, what if? Because if I had done that, while I might have had a successful career in corporate America or lived in a nice house or whatever it is, I would still have that in me somewhere of like, man, what if I'd just given it a shot?
Man, it's your dude at Willie's back in the day.
It is. It's totally.
And even though he impacted you, you don't think that came from he had regret on what he didn't continue?
I think there was for sure some regret, but he was also practical. And that was the other thing, is that I made those decisions when they were only affecting me. Like, I left P&G knowing that if it didn't work out, I'd probably still have time to get back into corporate America, and that I wasn't, hanging out a wife and children with no income because I wanted to go chase a dream. Like, I was very purposeful about when I did end up getting married and when we did have kids, is that I felt like I was at a point where I could support them because it wasn't just decisions that were affecting me anymore. We've done that as a t-shirt company, back when it was Darren and I, until we opened our first store, it was Darren and I for the first 8 years. And it was like, yeah, let's put out this super edgy shirt because if we piss off a lot of people, who cares? It's, I still got my stand-up money, and you still got your board game money, and you're still painting. Now, like, I have 30 employees that are going to be affected by the decisions we make. So maybe let's not put out that shirt that's going to piss off this person. Or, if I'm getting interviewed by the news, like, hey, let's talk about your store getting vandalized during the George Floyd riots. Like, I'm speaking with other people in mind. I'm really careful about how I convey my personal opinions on stuff because it can impact other people. And I, that's just something that's always top of mind for me. Even being here today, it's like I'm representing more than just me now.
It's more important than to express how you feel is to connect with how others feel.
Yes.
Way more important.
Yes.
Also, like, I was thinking about this, like, what's the purpose of life? And I'm like, man, be that person, that guy or girl that gets tapped on the shoulder at the Star Wars conference.
Well, I don't know about farting on other celebrities to,
whatever
hopefully have that achieved. But yes, do something great. I always joked about on stage, like, do what makes a better story. If you're presented with, that's how that story came to be, is that I was like, I'll either have no story because I'll tell people, yeah, I met her and she wasn't very nice, or, we have this and then that particular story grew to so much more than just having a funny anecdote. It got to the point where I got picked up by a limo driver in Texas that the club had hired to take me to the comedy club, and he was like, I couldn't wait for you to be here because I love that joke, and I knew that I was picking up Jessica Simpson from the airport one day, and so I had your CD playing.
And you didn't talk about how you're insulted. You don't have to. But she pretty much insulted you on the point.
Yeah, she wasn't nice. She wasn't very nice.
Isn't it crazy that in that moment that you didn't feel good? You're insulted by this celebrity person that has a bigger celebrity than you. And
Right.
You're like, this is not cool. This doesn't feel good. And then all of this goodness, the tap on the shoulder, comes from that moment.
Yes. And what's funny is I would save it for like radio stations and stuff like that. And then I was in Shreveport, Louisiana at the club. And I was talking to this group of people after the show, and I was like, what are you guys doing? They're like, we're here working on Dukes of Hazzard. They were on the film crew. And I was like, oh, I got a story for you about Jessica Simpson because she's in the movie. And so they're like, why don't you talk about that on stage? I was like, well, honestly, I give everybody the benefit of the doubt. Like, I'm sure there's moments if somebody came up to me that I would not have been my best person. And so maybe she was having a bad day. It's just a fun little story that I can share with people. And they go, oh no, she treats people like that every day. Everyone she meets, she treats that way. So that's when I decided to start telling it on stage. And so I had this, special come out, and at the time there was an online magazine that was all about stand-up comedy that was really popular, called Punchline, and they did this article about the 10 best stories told by comedians. And it was like Lewis Black and Ron White and Dane Cook, and they put my Jessica Simpson story in there. So it got a lot of, notoriety for that or whatever. And so fast forward like a couple years later, my manager goes, what's wrong with he calls me, he's like, your website's down. I was like, what do you mean? He goes, your website's down. I pull it up, and sure enough, it's crashed. And I've called the IT guy, and I was like, hey, do you know what's going on? And he's like, oh yeah, it looks like too much traffic. And I was like, when would I ever have too much traffic that it would crash my website? So I started digging around. Come to find out, TMZ on their TV show did a story about Jessica Simpson where she was in a meeting at Macy's, and like they were talking about her brand and all the people involved with it, and she's like kind of off to the side while they're all meeting, and she farts in this meeting. And everybody knows it was her because she's off to the side by herself. And so somehow it becomes a story on TMZ, right? Well, I guess enough people were looking for it that they then go to the internet and they go, Jessica Simpson farted, and they do a Google search where I am the number one search for Jessica Simpson farting by a couple years already. And so people start clicking my website thinking they're going to find out that story, and then they find out my story. And then it gets put on Funny or Die and blows up there. And it's just like one night on a plane, somebody wasn't nice to me.
And this is what happens.
It's made me so much money.
So when they come and see you, I just saw on your social media that like August 23rd, you're in Louisville.
August 10th.
10th,
yes,
so I apologize.
Yeah, Thursday, August 10th, I'll be in Louisville at the Comedy Club one night.
So what happens when somebody shows up? What happens? What do we hear? What do we see?
Well, right now, I'm in a weird spot between specials. So I had filmed one for Dry Bar that had a little bit of new stuff. It's gone way better than I planned. I mean, it's at like 50 million views, all the different clips, which is more than anything I've ever done.
That's nuts.
And this was for a brand that no one had ever heard of at the time, Dry Bar. They just wanted to make a library of clean stand-up comedy. So that has that coincided with the T-shirt company firing on a lot of its cylinders, and then my kids being at an age where they're a little more self-sustainable and their big moments are not as frequent, that I can start to devote a little bit more time to writing again. So all those things combined have got me in a writing phase where I'm like starting to really crank out some ideas that I've really just sat on for several years. So in Louisville specifically, they'll probably see a mix of all the stuff that no one's heard really yet because it's brand new, and then some kind of highlights from like the Dry Bars, just some older material. But I'll be up there an hour, and they'll probably hear 80% new stuff, 20% old stuff, and then I'm trying to get that 80% to 100% so that I can record the next special. So that it's looking at hopefully later this year or early next year, I'll be recording the next big thing that I'll release, which is very exciting for me.
Where will you do that?
I don't know yet.
Will you do it live?
I'll do it live for sure. I'll have to find a place that I feel like I can draw a good crowd, like enough, like total bodies,
What's enough?
to have a
100 or
good
200?
show. No, I'd at least, I see myself doing it in a big club, not in a small theater. So, big club, 300, 400.
It's a good number.
Maybe Chicago is kind of one of the places I'm looking at. They have an improv there that's that big. But I'm not a theater act. I hope to be, but I'm not yet. So I think doing it in a theater would be a little bit disingenuous of like, this is what all my shows are like, I want it in a place that's very similar to what people would see if they came out. But I'll figure that out, and I'll talk to the label that I'm going to be recording it with and see if they have any suggestions of a place that would make sense from a crowd perspective, but also like logistically, like where we could set up cameras and get good sound and that sort of thing, because that'll all come into play.
Has Cincy, have we lost our mojo for comedy?
No, I don't think so.
Okay.
No. Go Bananas is still just a perfect venue for comedy. Low ceiling, amazing sound, not too many people. It holds like 200. When that place is full, it's just magical. Like it's why, say what you want about Louis C.K., but when he was at the top of his game, he was wanting to record an album there when it could fill a much bigger venue. The Funny Bone is fantastic. They bring in great acts that for all intents and purposes, Go Bananas can't bring in because they just don't have the capacity. And as far as a layout for a big club goes, the Funny Bone in Liberty Township is gorgeous. I mean, it's 3 levels, and when that place is full, it's rocking. And then you have, the local scene here, which I'm not as tapped into as I used to be, just because I'm, if I'm trying out new material, it's going to be on stage during my headlining set. I'm really not going to open mic nights because it's just, I've, too many other obligations to pull away for, I want to go try out this 5 minutes somewhere. But the local scene here, they're doing shows everywhere. When I started, it was you either got on stage at Go Bananas, or maybe you could find a bar that would let you do an open mic night. There's shows all over the city, always here. People putting on their own stuff. It's really, really, really cool to see.
Is there a central place for all of us, for the citizens to find? Is there a
there's if you're looking for it, it's not too hard to find. The social media is probably the best. There's Cincinnati comedy groups on Facebook, and certain people you could follow on Instagram or Twitter that are constantly promoting where they're doing their local shows. But they're going on at breweries and bars and basements, and all kinds of places. I know the Madison. I just did a show at the Madison as a fundraiser for my kids' baseball youth baseball organization. I just did a show there. I know he's wanting to do more comedy. That's a great venue, the Madison. I just think it's such a fun time to be here in Cincinnati as someone who's born and raised, to see the things that we're doing in sports, but also just in creativity, in food, technology-wise. Like, this city is on fire.
Feels
right
like
now.
It's popping, right?
Yeah.
Everything.
And it's not just the new people either, Like, I don't know if you guys ever address what your definition of an entrepreneur is on this show, but Jeff Ruby is an entrepreneur, and I don't think people would necessarily consider him a traditional one, but he's still evolving, and creating,
yes.
and building off what's the next big thing.
Yep, like they moved to their new place, and then their old place became an event, right? And
but even the things they're doing at their new place with the different things in the culinary world, and just the people who are opening restaurants. Boca and Soto and the Eagle. I'll fight somebody over the best fried chicken I've ever had is in Cincinnati on Main Street or on Vine Street. We're seeing a renaissance in this city, and it's not just for
one category,
one person. Sean Heron and the stuff he's doing with NFTs, and Terry Lukemeyer, filmmakers, and the commercials that are being shot out of here. Lightborn. They're doing people. I don't think people realize Super Bowl halftime shows are being orchestrated from a company in Cincinnati. The building that we've been printing out of for T-shirts, the Essex Studios in Clifton. That's where they made the green jackets for the Masters. There's so much cool stuff coming out of this city, and that has always been a passion of mine for stand-up. When I'm on the road, I want people to know that I'm from here because I'm proud to be from here. And the fact that this city is starting to really get noticed, whether it's the eyeballs coming in because of the success of our sports teams, whatever it is, this city is ready to say, we're here for it.
What would make the best place to do comedy? The best. So when you think around the country,
elements of it,
just every piece of it. So when you've gone around the country, if you think about you said Go Bananas, but your favorite place, or if you had to develop one, if you're so proud of the city,
the Columbus Funny Bone is, I think, the blueprint for the perfect comedy club. I've always said that.
What's the best location in a city? Is it more urban? Is it more to Liberty Township? What's best?
That's the thing. I think if you become a destination, it doesn't matter where it is. In some cities, it's the suburbs. In some cities, it's the smack dab in the middle of a mall. In some places, it's the basement of a seedy, you know what I mean? It doesn't matter. You have to grow the brand of your comedy club as a place that people trust to put on a good show. When you rely on, hey, this guy that you've seen in a movie who's not great at stand-up is coming to do stand-up in 6 months, so get your tickets now. Or this is a famous TikToker, get your tickets now. When you rely on that, you're not growing a great brand of comedy. What you want is people to say, I'm going to the comedy club tonight. I don't know who it is, but I know I'm going to have a good time. That's the sweet spot. When you're not papering the room and giving away tickets, when you have a room full of people that have a vested interest in being at the show and show up expecting to hear good comedy, that's the sweet spot. And it doesn't matter what part of town it is. It doesn't matter how many people it holds or how few people it holds. You can have magic with 20 people. You can have magic with 10,000 people. But you can also have a disaster, absolute train wreck with 200 people that are hammered because they got free tickets after their happy hour for their entire office.
So with the passion you have for comedy, also you have a good entrepreneur creative mind. Has it ever crossed your mind that I'm going to open a comedy?
I don't know. I mean, that would be so far down the road. I've helped people book shows. I think I have a good eye for tell me about your event or, tell me what's going on, who the audience is, and I'll tell you and what your budget is, and I'll find you the comedian that would be good for that. I think I have a knack for that.
So isn't that a guy who would also be a great operator?
Well, not necessarily, because then you're dealing with agents, and you've got to, to do it 52 weeks a year is a lot different than being a good reference for people. I mean, I've turned down gigs that paid well, that I knew I wouldn't be a good fit for. It didn't sound like it was a real good environment for comedy, or my style anyway. So I think knowing my limitations helps also, as much as being able to find somebody else that would be a good fit. But you just, you start to build it. Like corporate stuff is something that I knew I always wanted to get into, and the Dry Bar has really afforded me the opportunity to accelerate that line of work, because the pay is so good for one show, but you have to be clean.
I was going to say, was it important to be clean?
Yeah.
That was it. You have to be, right?
Yes. But going back to John Gamber, the guy that helped me, he never said I had to be squeaky clean, but he taught me a lesson I still apply today, and I pass on to younger comics when talking about, like, unless it's your style, right? Unless you're Bill Burr or a style that is completely unhinged and unfiltered, and that's the draw. John Gamber taught me to treat vulgar language or obscenities like a spice. He said it'll make a steak taste good, but you'd never have a plate of oregano for dinner. And I've kept that advice my entire career. And then the lady that ran the comedy club in Dayton, she said, the cleaner you can, this is when I first started, and I was just trying to be an MC. She said, the cleaner you can be, the more often that I can use you. Because if you're dirty, I can only put you in front of dirty headliners. But if you're clean, I can put you in front of clean or dirty headliners. And then, I grew up in a very strict Southern Baptist home with church-going parents. So I wanted to know that I could invite my mom or dad out to a show and not be embarrassed by what I was talking about. That was important to me. So all those things combined led me to just sort of having a career in creating material that was, for the most part, clean. But if I needed to be squeaky clean, I could. I also find it more challenging. I think it's harder to get a laugh from a squeaky clean joke than it is to get a laugh from a dirty joke, because I think too many comics use it as a crutch or like a bailout for a punchline that's missing the funny. So I find a fun challenge in it, and all of that is translated to be able to take more corporate work, because I don't really have to adjust my act from what I'm doing in the club to be able to do it for their event.
So I could stay here all day and talk to you. It's been awesome, man. The conversation's been great. You mentioned something, I think, before we got on. I don't know if Dave caught it or not, but you said you grew up in St. Bernard, which is a urban suburb pretty much just north of downtown. Yeah. Right?
Yep.
And I said, okay, Mitchell Avenue and all that. You're like, yeah, man. Like I said something. You're like, oh, he gets a little bit. But I said, you got into some trouble, huh? And you're like, no, man, I was the good kid.
Yeah. So St. Bernard, I think it's having a bit of a renaissance right now. But when I grew up there, it was Mayberry. I mean, it was Main Street. You had the butcher. You had it was that, I remember my grandma getting milk delivered to her front porch and taking away the empty bottles. Like, it was that kind of, middle America. My mom always used to say that it was the only part of town where you didn't need a realtor. You literally just had to put a sign for sale in your front yard and you'd sell it. And my mom grew up in St. Bernard, and my dad grew up in Elmwood, which the high school is St. Bernard Elmwood Place High School. So they're both local and grew up there. And there was sort of a thing about St. Bernard that you graduated with people that you went to kindergarten with. But also it was so small that everybody knew you. Everybody knew your business. And, if you did something wrong, like you couldn't get away with it. And so, again, strict Southern Baptist home, parents that grew up there and knew everybody. Like I knew I wasn't going to get away with anything. And my mom was president of the school board. So I couldn't get away with anything at school. You know what I mean? So it was like I never ran around with kids that were misbehaving. I had like an amazing childhood. I always joked with my mom and dad that they made it really hard for me to become a comedian because I never really had this like dark depression, to draw from that a lot of other comics do. I had like a really awesome childhood. We weren't rich, but we weren't poor, and
it couldn't have been any better.
Yeah, it was the best place to grow up. P&G had a huge soap plant on St. Bernard property, so our schools were well funded. Even though we were tiny schools, we had great teachers and nice facilities, and it was just I couldn't have asked for anything different growing up, and I was not a bad kid. I got detentions because I was a smart aleck, but I was an A student in detention. I always joked that the detention was worth it if the teacher was laughing while they wrote the detention slip.
You were refining the comedy then.
And then they all show up at the comedy, even just this show at the Madison 2 weeks ago. I had a teacher from my high school foreign language teacher show up and just tell me how proud she was of me. And I'm like, all this stuff was getting me in trouble. You're just proud that I found a way to apply it to a career.
So is the Josh now just an iteration of the kid?
Oh, for sure. Oh, totally. I'm a big child. I'm always joking around at home, and it's funny. I still have the same juvenile things still make me laugh. I like to try to think my material has evolved, but in terms of me personally, I'm there with my 12-year-old giggling.
Did the I'll talk for days, man, but unless there's something you want to add here at the end. So think about it, but I have one final when comedy wasn't as financially important to your life.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm assuming that transition, it happened somewhere.
Yeah.
Right? When it wasn't, did it become more satisfying?
Only in the sense that the need to do it subsided, right? Like the financial need to do it. You see people that you either used to work with or P&G, or comedians that have quote unquote made it and the things that they have. And so you would like to get to a point where you're able to provide those things for yourself or your family. But the one beautiful thing that P&G did for me is that I knew what I was giving up to quit. I knew the kind of life I was going to walk away from if I took this risk to do stand-up. And I think the pitfall that a lot of comedians, I'll say specifically, I'm sure it could apply to other occupations, but comedians specifically make is that they do it full-time too soon. And they go out before they're ready because they're just walking away from maybe a job serving or something that they're just like, oh, I'll just do this now, right? And then so they get kind of labeled as someone who's a little green, and that's a hard opinion to shake when people have that of you, right? And so P&G, because I knew what I was walking away from and because I had a lifestyle from working there that I enjoyed, it really forced me to stay there until probably after I was ready, right? Because I didn't want to have to go from that to like taking the bus everywhere or sleeping on someone's couch. Like I wanted to be able to kind of maintain something close to that. So I really, really waited until I knew that I was ready to do it. And so while I was always able to, like, I considered it a success that I could pay my bills by doing comedy, what really I think I like the most about the increase in pay as I increased through the business and got more credits was like, okay, if I say to myself, I have to make, $5,000 a month doing comedy, however that adds up. Well, at one point that was, making $1,500 a week for 4 straight weeks, right? Mm-hmm. Or three out of the 4 weeks of the month. Well, now I can get a corporate gig that pays $5,000. Now I'm working 1 day. So I've made my comedy money for the month. I still have these other open days. I can go book more comedy. I can take a trip with my family. You know what I mean? And if I get another one of those gigs in that month, now that's 2 days that I'm working for the whole month, and I've made double my monthly nut. So now let's do something fun, right? I'm a big can't take it with you kind of guy. Like we have our savings and what we think we'll need, but I'm not like, let's just sock it all away. Let's just, it's like, let's go do something fun. Let's go to the Reds game tonight. Let's drive down to Gatlinburg and make fun of people watching taffy get made or whatever it is, right? Whatever it is, like, I'm just happy that I'm at a position now financially that we don't have to worry about, I don't know if we should or not,
You don't have a scarce mindset.
I don't think life is as fun. We talked about this in the beginning, right? You can't live in fear.
Your kids, man, like, at this moment, I'm like, oh, you're giving them an awesome childhood. There's no doubt.
I hope so.
No, man, because the people that I hear that, like, man, my childhood was awesome, had some of those experiences with parents. They did.
Yeah.
And it's not just whatever it was, full circle even, about your dad, and you said you didn't get into cars like him, but I bet the interactions, man, if he'd take you to a Reds game, whatever it was, he probably lived some impromptu moments.
Oh, for sure. And I that's the struggle. It's honestly the struggle with how much I do with my kids. Mm-hmm. Is like, I also don't want to raise spoiled children, right? And I try to give them as much perspective as I can and try to make them do things that hopefully will help them appreciate what they have and the experiences that they have. But that's like the balance of having access to be able to do that stuff and not overdoing it to where they lose appreciation for it. Because it's, we all, no matter how good any of our childhoods are, we always want our kids to have a better one, right? And so, like, I tell my son, and honestly my daughter too, it's like, as a kid, I remember going to 2 Reds games a year would be amazing. I'd get one for tickets for getting good grades, and then our church group my dad would like organize a group of like, all right, we're gonna go watch them play the Dodgers, and we're gonna take the bus down, and we get like a group of 30
sit in the red seats.
Yeah. And it's like, to be able to just, hey, let's go to the Reds game tonight, we don't got anything going on, like that was just not a thing, but it never felt like we were missing out back then. So I don't know. It's a balance for sure, but that's my only focus in life at this point is whatever happens with the career, am I creating 2 humans that will want to leave the world a better place than they found it?
I'm assuming you're on a pretty good path.
Well, I appreciate that.
Yeah, man.
It remains to be seen.
Thanks again for stopping in. This was awesome. So what's CincyShirts.com, right? I'm assuming. Or is that
yeah, CincyShirts.com. Come see us at either one of our stores. If we have our brand. We're always open to ideas people have of things they'd like to see us offer. But also, I'm sure you have a lot of business owners here, and we have a great program for helping companies that need merch. Whether you need it for an event or some kind of solution for your employees to buy, whatever it is, merch needs, we are around to help.
We've got the size challenge. Happens to us every time. We have a swag shop down on the 8th floor for Pivot for the real estate company, and it's always smalls left, man.
Yeah.
It's always, it's weird that every once in a while there'll be a 2X, but we never order enough of those because you actually need like 3.
Yep.
Right. So we have the same problem.
Trust me.
We order those.
And I tell people, like, that's the kind of advice we'll give you. This is a free piece. I'm not charging anybody for this.
Wow.
Right? You're ordering T-shirts. You're debating on smalls or mediums. Get more mediums, because somebody who wears a small will wear a medium, but somebody who wears a medium will never wear a small.
Wow, brilliance we just had here today.
That's free. That's free.
And then Josh Sneed, right? JoshSneed.com.
JoshSneed.com, all the social medias. Just find me on there. I try to generate fun content, which I am already thinking of the perfect. I have like 4 people that I want to send your way, but a lot of dad jokes.
Yeah.
Joel Willis is a good friend of mine. He started The Dad.
The Dad.
Yep. You've got to have him on here.
The Dad.
He needs to be your next phone call. I will go out on a limb and tell you will be.
Do you think a setup would be good? Because we have 4 spots here.
Yep.
Like, could we pull it off with having another person and you guys just come at some jokes and have fun? And because I'm not the comedian, man.
Yeah.
Hopefully I'm the proper guy to take you through the conversation.
I can be that guy.
Yeah.
I can be your Ed McMahon, like off to the side. And I can also be the guy sitting over here off camera with a mic in your ear going, you should say this.
Piping something.
You should say this.
So we don't have that right now. I don't have a producer in my ear. I just make him talk. He hasn't said anything today, but
I can get on and say something.
So what you don't know about this dry humor is sick. It comes out of nowhere and he busts us. So we're like, oh my God.
It's the best kind. It's that assassin kind of comedy. I love it.
It's all about timing.
It really is all about timing. And that's how I learned to deal with hecklers. Is I would see too many comedians dig themselves a hole because somebody would say something and then they would just say the first thing and it's like, that wasn't the right thing to say. So now it's this back and forth and now he looks funnier than you do. What you do is you engage them a little bit and you just wait and you wait for them to set it up and then you just hit them with the haymaker.
Let them dig their grave.
Oh, man, it's the best feeling in the world.
Would this work on stage? Like, I'm starting to do this now when they are, when somebody just be really mean, because I have to deal with, when it gets to my desk now, because we'll sell 1,000 homes, 1,200 homes this year. We're like the local brand that's coming for everybody.
Yeah.
And when somebody's really mad, I wait for the right moment, but I try to do it and make it come across as really empathetic. So I'm giving away my secret for free. So if a mad customer's on here that ever gets mad at Pivot, I'm like, hey, are you okay?
It's how you say. That's a sentence you got to be careful how you say.
You do, right? Because it could, if in the right moment you can come across really caring for them. Like, man, you're having a terrible day. Like, hey, is everything okay?
Yeah, that's a lot different than.
Are you okay?
Are you okay?
Would that work for a heckler? Because you could say it, they won't say anything else, right?
Then we'll have one of the moments you and I had at the beginning of this, where they're just now you just got a guy crying in the audience. I was like, man, this is what either one of us signed up for.
Because don't they just start thinking about their wife what led them to that day? Maybe.
Sure, I've had people cry after the shows to me. It's powerful. It's powerful. I was never like this emotional, like talking until my dad passed away. But I'm like, it's like bad. It's like real, like, it's like, man, did you see that? You see that Keebler cracker commercial, the way he talked to that little elf? I mean, who talks to people? It's just like, what is wrong with me? I got invited to do this storytellers thing downtown. And they were like, give us some ideas of what you could talk about. And I was like, I would talk about how my dad influenced me to become a comedian. I was like, yeah, it sounds like a great idea. Right. So I'm down there and I'm like the 4th one to go. And I open with like some of my stand up, everybody's cracking up laughing. And then as soon as my mouth opens, I was like, my dad. And then I'm like bawling tears on stage I'm like, this is not good storytelling. This is, this is like me, like, trying to deal with some stuff, but yeah,
good
man.
for you, bad for them.
Yeah, like this isn't what anybody wanted from the comedian. And then later,
no, you're awesome, man. I think, who knows? I think the idea of this podcast,
it's great.
Thanks,
I
man.
love that you would even like. I'm just such a champion for Cincinnati.
Yeah,
and and people not having to feel like they have to leave here to go create awesome stuff other places. And I love that. I love what you're doing.
Let's do it, man. And I think I just said, hey, let's tell stories to, my whole life is entrepreneurship. I mean, yours is comedy. You have a great mixture of these things. And so what I found was all the time was there's a lot of people who want to start a business, who fail. And you had the perfect analogy. Like, you worked in corporate America enough to, like, know what you were walking away from. I know the importance of that. You also know what you don't want to go back to.
Oh, for sure.
Right?
Oh, my gosh. As soon as you said that, I go back to the summer of my junior year of high school when I got hired at Central Steel and Wire Company in Elmwood to clean their machines. Me and two of my high school buddies, we got paid to start in the beginning of the steel mill. And the first machine, clean it. They did this every 8 years. So 8 years worth of soot. We're cleaning the machine, and then we give it a new paint coat. And all I could think that whole summer is, whatever you do in life, make sure you don't have to do this.
Right on, man. And I think, and so I just want people to know, like, hey, you can, whatever business, whatever your passion is, whatever you think, like, I'm going to go do it, you can. You 100% can, because there's probably someone else who has. But let's hear the stories of those who have, just to let you know a little bit. If you haven't done it, because I don't want you to ruin your life.
Right.
And if you do quit a job where things are settled and things are going well and it doesn't go well, you're going to learn some lessons. But, man, it's a lot of lessons that you might not want to learn.
Yeah, or have to.
That's it,
if
man.
you just ask somebody.
Yeah, just hear the stories. And so I think that's whether it's being a comedian, whether it's being, we had a anchor woman on here the other day. We had a guy who started Kona Ice. I mean, it's these stories
Love
like,
Tony.
yeah, right. He's an awesome dude.
The best.
Yep. And so it is just, and having Mo, I mean, his story, you're friends with him. He just came on and I met him. But his story on going to UD, getting that call about nobody else wanted to come on at Christmas, and he's like, here's your shot. It's no different than them calling you. You had called for weeks or months. They didn't return your call, and all of a sudden they had an opening. Mm-hmm. That was out of desperation for them. Who could we get to do this? You picked up the phone. For him, he had been asking. He wanted to be an employee at 700. Time after time after time, nobody else wanted to do it. And they're like, man, listen, you're going to have to be here late night, Christmas. He's like, okay, I'll do it. It's these stories of whether it's entrepreneurship, whether it's entrepreneurship. It's doing whatever it takes, no matter what.
Yes.
And we've all had these moments for years. And you just got to let people know, like, hey, you better be all in on this thing.
Right. That's the key.
Yeah.
That is the key. And I tell young comics this all the time, is you have to find something that you are as passionate about from a emotional standpoint to succeed in as financial. Like when someone says, how do you know if you should do comedy full time? Or how do you know if you should do comedy at all? And I tell them, I say, if you go up on stage and no matter how it goes, you can't wait to get back up there again, then that's how you know it's for you, right? If you're constantly have a fear of failure and something goes wrong and you're walking on eggshells because all you can focus on is, I don't want to feel that way again. Like whatever your passion is, whatever that business is, you have to say, if I had to do this for free, would I? And then if you have that kind of passion about it, the money will come.
It will. If you stick with it, it'll come.
And that's why this podcast is so important, because it shows that there are so many people that have learned these lessons and can help you avoid mistakes, that if you just take the time to listen to it, we've all gotten to a point, and I can tell you are too, where it's like, there's plenty of food. We can all eat. All right. This isn't me or you. Yep. Even if we're in the same field, this isn't me or you.
Doesn't matter, man. Doesn't matter.
The best advice I've gotten is from other comedians who were trying to get the same weeks at the comedy club that I was. We both realized, like, we'll get a lot further if we help each other. And you tell me, like, hey, don't call this person at this time. That helps me out. Like, just that little nugget helps me out. Or the best time to reach them is this time. Or you should say this. Like, that little stuff helps, and it can be applicable this on a podcast like this for having people on for 2 hours every episode. Oh my gosh.
Just keep going.
Creating a database of knowledge.
And I've told these guys, I say, guys, just wait for 50 more episodes. Think how good we're going to be then, because the first 5 sucked. I wasn't good. We weren't good. And so I'm like, this is like our second. So I'm just wait, because in 50 more, we're going to be probably 300% better. And then just wait for 100 more.
Well, what's going to happen too is you're going to say, oh, remember when we were getting, however many views on these first episodes and now we're getting 50,000 downloads. What you're going to find is that person who finds you at episode 150 and goes, this is awesome. They're going to come back and they're going to watch episode 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 5. And so you'll start. I've seen it with my stand-up. I've had clips that have been out there that have sat at like 2,000 views for 10 years. And then I have a clip that hits 40 million. That clip that had 2,000, now it's at like 4 million because people were like, oh, what else is out there? So you have the foresight of like even the people that you're talking to today can provide something to people who might not hear it for a little while.
Just keep going.
Yeah.
Just keep going if you got a passion behind it. So I'm excited, man. It's I love that. Without this, I wouldn't get to talk to a guy like you.
Thanks, man.
Yeah, it's really cool.
It's been great.
All right, look forward to it again. Who knows what we can sit here and have some fun. I just want to sit here and laugh my ass off. Like I don't
feel like I've been funny at all.
Well, here's what I took away from you, which I like. It wasn't even intentional. When I said in the beginning I was like, man, we're just sitting down for a conversation. Like when we talked comedy today, it was serious.
Yeah, well, it's a business.
That's it. See, that's what the conversation should be here.
Yeah.
But there will be a time when I'm just going to sit here. I can't wait until I'm just rolling.
Yeah.
And you could probably help us do that. That could be really, really fun.
Well, if I can make fun of somebody else that's crying on the podcast, then we'll get to it quicker.
You guys crush me, laugh at me, do whatever you want to do. All right, man. Thanks.
Thank you.
Catch you next time.
Yep.
All right.